Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed tonight, an eerie tales from the world's oldest and most mysterious cemeteries, a journey in 3 hours. We descend into the quietest, most unsettling places on earth where the world of the living fades into shadow, and only the whispers of the dead remain. We're about to embark on a journey through tombstones and burial sites that have stood for centuries, holding secrets buried deep beneath the soil. These are the resting places where history never dies, and the dead refuse to stay silent. In the next 3 hours, we'll explore the oldest, most haunted cemeteries across the globe, places where ancient stories linger, and where every stone seems to pulse with an eerie energy. The graves that call to the living, the ones that make your skin crawl, and those that hold restless spirits who have yet to say their final goodbye. Each tale you're about to hear is real. It's taken from those brave enough to stand before these graves, feeling the weight of something far more sinister than just the earth beneath their feet. My goal this month is to reach 4,000 subscribers. Almost 90% of viewers wander in, listen, and vanish into the dark without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Join the darkness. Subscribe now. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and what hour of the night it is for you. And if there's a grave or cemetery in your town that truly unsettles you, type its name below, because when the world sleeps and the soil settles, some things beneath it do not rest. Kill the lights, silence the world, take a slow breath, and let us begin. My name is Samuel Hayes, and I'm from a little place called Chapel Hill, Texas. Not many folks know about it, but it's just a short drive from Brenham, nestled in the piney woods. I spent most of my life here, and I reckon I'll probably die here too. There's something about this land that keeps a man close. Even when he's long past the days of tending to fields or hauling hay, the past is something that sits heavy around here, like the heat in July, always lurking just beneath the surface. Folks talk about the old days sometimes, but not too often, and when they do, they speak in whispers, like they're afraid of stirring up something that's been lying still for too long. I didn't always understand why people here were so quiet, so reluctant to talk about things, but I do now. There's a certain truth about this place, a truth that I wasn't ready for until I couldn't run from it any longer. I remember the first time I noticed it. It was a warm evening in late spring, the kind where the air still feels thick and alive, and the scent of fresh-cut grass mixes with the smell of rain waiting to fall. I was sitting on the porch of my old house, just rocking in that chair my granddaddy made. The creaking of the wood almost as familiar to me as the sound of my own voice. The sun had just set, and I could hear the crickets in the distance, the wind rustling through the oak trees, and the faintest sound of a dog barking somewhere down the road. It was a peaceful kind of night, the kind that makes you forget about the world and lose yourself in the quiet. But something felt ... off. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but I knew there was something different about that evening. The air had that stillness to it, that kind of hush before the storm. The porch light was buzzing softly, like it always did when the heat got to it, and I could hear the faint crackle of an old country song coming from the radio inside. I didn't think much of it at first, but when I stood up and walked down the old dirt road that led to the cemetery, the one just past the creek, I noticed something strange. A grave. One that I'd never seen before. Now, I've walked past that cemetery 1,000 times, and I know every marker, every worn-out stone. But there it was, a grave that wasn't there before, tucked away in the corner near the old oak tree where the forgotten souls of the town rest. I took a step closer, and it sent a chill up my spine. It wasn't just the grave itself that bothered me, but the feeling it gave off. A sense of ... waiting. It wasn't marked. There was no name. Just a stone, worn and chipped, like it had been there for ages, but at the same time, like it had just been put there. I told myself it was just the wind playing tricks, or maybe it was an old grave that had somehow gone unnoticed. But the closer I got, the more unsettled I felt. Every night after that, I'd go back and check. The grave seemed to shift, like the ground around it was slowly settling, as though someone was moving beneath it. It wasn't a big change, but it was enough to make you notice. I wasn't sure if I was imagining it, but it felt like the earth was alive out there, breathing. I started hearing things at night, too, soft whispers carried by the wind, like someone was speaking from just beyond the trees. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was a call, like someone was trying to reach me. I couldn't shake it, and I started staying away from the cemetery. But every time I'd drive past it, I'd feel that tug, like something was waiting. One afternoon, I went to the local library and found an old map of the town, one that had been drawn up back when the cemetery was first laid out. There, in the corner of the map, was the grave I'd seen, only it didn't have a name, and it wasn't marked as part of the cemetery. It was outside the boundaries, tucked away, hidden from view. I asked the librarian about it, but she didn't say much, just that there were things in this town that weren't meant to be uncovered. That night, I returned to the cemetery. It was darker than usual, with a thick mist settling low to the ground. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing in from all sides. I walked to the grave again, and this time, the stone was no longer just shifting. It had cracked, just slightly, enough to see something beneath it. A hand, pale and long-fingered, was reaching out, as though it was trying to claw its way free. I backed away, my heart pounding, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. Something or someone was down there, waiting. I don't know what came over me, but I felt compelled to uncover the grave, to see what was beneath it. I didn't think about what might happen, not until I was already on my knees, my hands digging into the earth. What I found wasn't a body, though. It was a box, an old wooden box, sealed tight, and when I opened it, all I found was a piece of paper worn and yellowed with age. Written on it, in neat handwriting, were the words, "They cannot rest until they are remembered." I buried the box again. I did. I put it back and covered it up, and I left that cemetery in a hurry, not looking back. But the feeling, that unease, has never left me. Every time I pass that cemetery now, I can't help but look. And I swear, every time there's something new, a crack in the stone out of place, the air heavier than it should be. I still don't know what's buried there, or what I uncovered that night. But I know this, some things are meant to stay buried, and some graves aren't meant to be found. I've learned that the hard way, and I reckon maybe some things should stay forgotten. But the truth is, I don't think it will ever be forgotten. Not by me. The land remembers. It always does. My name is Walter Hendricks, and I'm from a little town called Gorman, Texas, up near the west part of the state, where the roads stretch out far and wide and the land don't seem to end. It's quiet up there, especially at night. You get those long stretches of highway where nothing but the moon and the occasional car lights make their way across the flat, dusty land. Now, I've lived here all my life, and I've seen a lot of things. But there's one thing I can't quite explain. Something that happened years ago that still stays with me, even though I try to forget it. I used to drive a truck for a living, hauling this and that across the state, mostly down to San Antonio or Austin, sometimes further south. I'd been at it for about 30 years when it happened, so by then the roads felt like an old friend to me. The hum of the engine, the wind through the windows, the sound of tires on that cracked asphalt. But on one particular night, that familiar road took me somewhere else, somewhere I didn't expect. It was one of those nights when you get that kind of stillness, like the world's holding its breath. I had just crossed into Lampasas, and I was heading toward a little gas station on the outskirts. It wasn't much an old place, with a broken neon sign hanging by the edge. The kind of gas station you'd expect to see out in the middle of nowhere. No lights on in the building, just a single porch light humming out front. The kind that flickers every now and then like it's about to give out. I pulled in to top off my tank, a little tired from the long haul, but not feeling much else. The station had been here for decades, probably before I was even born, and nothing ever changed about it. The kind of place where you stop, get out, and the only noise you hear is the sound of your boots on the gravel. I'd been there hundreds of times, but that night, something was different. As I walked toward the pump, I noticed someone standing by the old porch, leaning against the railing. Now, I've lived in Texas long enough to know the difference between someone just passing through and someone who's been around a while. This man, though, well, he didn't belong there. He was older, looked weathered like he'd been out in the sun too long. but there was something about him that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. He was wearing a long coat, which struck me as odd, because it wasn't all that cold, not by a long shot. And he wasn't just standing there, but holding something too, a set of old, tarnished keys. Keys that looked like they hadn't seen the light of day in years. He didn't say a word, just stood there watching me. I tried not to think too much of it. Maybe he was just another drifter, though that didn't feel right. You get a sense for things like that when you're on the road long enough. As I was filling up, I looked over and the man was still there, just staring at me. Now I don't scare easy, but something about his stillness, the way he didn't move or blink, made me feel uneasy. I remember telling myself it was nothing, just a stranger, but something in my gut told me otherwise. I finished up, got back in the truck, and started the engine. That old truck of mine had a way of stalling sometimes, but it started right up that night, smoother than I expected. I pulled out, and just before I passed the old station, I looked back in my mirror. He was still standing there, staring. I shook my head and told myself to let it go. But every time I passed that gas station after that, whether it was weeks or months, there he was. Standing in the same spot, same old coat, same set of keys, watching me. I didn't stop anymore. Didn't want to. I kept my eyes straight ahead, didn't look over. I'd like to say I convinced myself it was all in my head. Maybe he was just a man, or maybe a ghost, or maybe something else entirely. But it wasn't until one evening, a few years later, that I finally learned the truth. I had to go back to that station for some reason. Don't remember why now, but it was late. The sun was just starting to set. I pulled in, just as I always had. The old station was still there, though it had seen better days. The porch light buzzed and flickered, like it was struggling to stay on. And sure enough, he was there again. I got out of the truck, filled my tank, and when I looked up, there he was, standing in his usual spot. This time, though he didn't just watch me, he spoke, not loud, not harsh. Just a soft voice, like someone talking in their sleep. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Not with the keys. Some doors ain't meant to be opened." I didn't understand what he meant, but I sure knew that I was done. I got in my truck, started it up, and didn't look back. I didn't go back to that station after that. I never did. And even now, when I pass by, I can still feel the weight of his eyes on me. Still see those keys, old and heavy in his hands. I don't know who or what he was, but I know one thing for sure. He's still out there, waiting by the road, waiting for someone else to come. Sometimes, when the wind's just right, I can almost hear his voice again. And I wonder if maybe I wasn't supposed to leave. But then, I remind myself that some things, some people, are meant to be forgotten. My name is Gus Baker, and I'm from a little place called Navasota. It's Texas. It's not much to look at, just a town that's been here longer than most folks remember. I reckon that's what I like about it. Nothing too flashy, just wide skies and dirt roads. I was sitting out on my front porch one evening, a warm breeze blowing through the mesquite trees, the sound of crickets humming in the background like they always do. When I got to thinking about something that happened a long time ago, it's the kind of thing I never really talk about. But it's been rattling around in my head lately, so I reckon now's as good a time as any to say it. I was just a boy back then, maybe 14 or 15, and I had this little dog, a mutt I found running along the road one day. We didn't have much, but he was mine. He'd follow me everywhere down to the creek, across the old highway, and all the way to the edge of the town. I didn't know it at the time. But that little dog of mine was going to be part of a story I never quite understood, even after all these years. It started one summer afternoon. It's a kind of day where the heat just hangs in the air like a wet blanket, and all you can hear is the distant sound of a truck engine sputtering to life. I had just finished up helping my dad with some work on the truck and was sitting down by the back door, trying to catch my breath. I had my boots off, the dirt still caked on them, and a thermos of coffee sitting by my side, cooling down in the shade. The sun was low, and the air smelled like rain was coming. You know that smell? That wet, earthy scent that comes right before a storm. I wasn't thinking about much, just listening to the wind rustling through the trees. the soft creak of the screen door swaying in the breeze when I heard it. It was a whisper, like someone calling my name. At first, I figured it was just the wind, you know? But then it came again. Louder this time, almost like it was right there with me. "Gus," it said, soft and slow, like it was reaching for me. I glanced around, but there wasn't a soul in sight. My dog, O.L. Buster, he was already off down by the creek, wagging his tail and sniffing at the ground like he didn't have a care in the world. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just my mind playing tricks, but it didn't feel like that. You ever get that feeling? Like something's just not right? Like the air's a little too still, and the world's just a touch off-kilter? That's how I felt. I stood up, went inside for a bit, tried to forget it, but every time I looked out the window, it was there again, that whisper in the wind. It didn't make sense, and I didn't know what to do with it. The next day, I went down to town to pick up some supplies for my dad. It was a slow day, nothing much happening, just the usual folks sitting on their porches, watching the cars go by. I stopped by the gas station, the one on the corner of Main and 7th, and was filling up when I noticed a man standing on the other side of the pump. He was tall, his clothes a little too nice for Navasota, and he had this look in his eyes, like he was lost in thought, or maybe somewhere far away. He didn't say a word to me, but when he looked at me, I swear I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach twist. He wasn't there for long, just enough time to pay for his gas and get in his car. But before he drove off, he turned around and looked at me again. And that's when I heard it clear as daylight in my ear, like someone was standing right behind me. "Gus," it said, real soft, but there was something cold in it, like the wind had just gone still. I turned around fast, but nobody was there. The man was already pulling out onto the highway, disappearing into the dust. I didn't know what to make of it, and honestly, I didn't want to. I spent the rest of the day trying to keep my mind busy, working on the truck, helping my dad, anything to stay away from those whispers. But the next few days were the same. Every time I went outside, I'd hear it Gus, in the wind, in the trees, sometimes even when I was alone in the house. It was like it was following me, always just out of sight. One night, after we'd finished dinner, I told my dad I was going down to the creek to let Buster run around a bit. He didn't think nothing of it, just told me to be careful and not wander too far. It was dark by the time I got down there. The only light was from the half moon overhead, barely breaking through the trees. The creek was low that year, the water just a trickle over the rocks, but it was peaceful. I liked it down there, even though it was a little lonely, the kind of quiet that settles deep in your bones. I was standing there, throwing some rocks into the water, when I heard it again. That whisper right behind me. "Gus." I froze. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and my breath caught in my chest. This time, it wasn't just a voice. It was something else cold, like the night had suddenly wrapped itself around me. I turned around, and that's when I saw it. A figure, just a shadow really, standing by the edge of the creek. I couldn't make out any details, just the shape of a man, tall and still. My heart started pounding, and for the first time in a long while, I felt real fear. I didn't know what to do. I called out asking if it was someone from town, but there was no answer. Not even a rustle of leaves. I could feel the air grow heavier, colder, and my feet started to move before I could even think about it. I turned and ran, back up the hill, back toward home, not looking over my shoulder once. When I finally made it back, breathless and shaken, I didn't tell my dad, didn't tell anyone. But from that day on, those whispers never stopped. They'd come when I was alone, or sometimes when I was with someone. Like they were waiting for me to hear them, like they had something to say. I left Navasota for a while after that, went off to college, and then off to a job in the city. It wasn't until years later when I came back to visit that I finally found out who the man was. Turns out, he was someone from a long time ago, a man who died mysteriously. No one ever figured out how or why. They just buried him in the old cemetery, a name carved into a stone nobody ever looked at twice. But I remember the look in his eyes. He knew something I didn't, and maybe I'll never understand it. Sometimes, when I drive down that road now, I still feel the weight of it, the way the wind shifts, the way the trees bend. I'll stop at that old creek, and I'll listen for a whisper. but it's always gone before I can hear it. Always just out of reach. I don't know if it's just the land or if it's something else, but I reckon some stories aren't meant to be told. Maybe some things are just meant to stay buried, quiet, and waiting for someone else to hear them. That's the truth, I reckon, and it's one I don't much like to remember. My name's Sam Taylor, and I'm from a little town called Junction, Texas. Ain't much to Junction, not back then, and certainly not now. Just a few dusty streets, a gas station that's barely hanging on, and a couple of old folks who've lived there all their lives, just like me. I reckon I was about 16 when this happened, and I've been trying to forget it ever since. But some nights, when the wind's still and the cicadas go quiet, I can't help but remember. It was the summer, and I had just finished helping my uncle down at the old barn. You know, just a regular hot Texas afternoon. The kind where you can feel the dust in your throat and the sweat sticks to your shirt like it's got a mind of its own. Uncle John, he'd get in his truck, that old Ford that barely started up in the morning, and head down to the general store for a couple of things. I never liked being left alone out there at the barn, but it wasn't like I had a choice. So I stayed put, sitting on the steps with a thermos of coffee, watching the grass bend in the breeze. That's when I heard it, the sound of a voice. Not a real voice, mind you, not like someone was talking to me, but just the echo of a sound, like a low hum, kind of like when you hear a far-off radio coming through static. Now, I didn't think much of it at first, figured it was just the wind stirring up the dry grass. But then it came again, and this time it sounded closer. I looked around, saw no one. No cars on the road, no people walking by, nothing but the air thick with heat. But I couldn't shake that feeling that something was off. I told myself it was nothing, probably just my imagination. But that voice kept coming back every now and then, always a little louder, a little clearer. I got up, walked toward the old well that had been dry for years, thinking maybe it was just a bird or something, but no, that's not what it was. That's when I saw it. Just on the edge of the property, behind that stand of mesquite trees, there was something moving. But not like a person moving, more like the ground was moving. Like the earth itself was shifting, slowly. Like something was crawling up from deep beneath the soil. I didn't move at first. Just stood there, watching. And I could have sworn the ground was trembling, just a little, like a heartbeat you could feel in your feet. It took me a minute to pull myself together, but I didn't want to be a fool. I went back inside, told myself it was just the heat messing with my mind. I'd been working too hard. So I drank my coffee, wiped my hands on my jeans, and tried to forget about it. But as the sun started to sink low, I heard it again, that hum, low and deep. This time, I didn't wait. I grabbed the old shovel from the shed, told myself I'd just check out the spot behind the mesquites. And that's when I saw it. A small patch of ground, where nothing had been planted for years, looked different. The dirt was loose, like it had been disturbed. I dug my heel into it, and sure enough, it gave way. I pulled back the earth, not thinking much of it at first, but the deeper I dug, the stranger it felt. It wasn't the weight of the dirt or the heat, but the way the soil seemed to fight back, like it didn't want to be moved. But I kept going, until I saw something that made my stomach turn. A small wooden marker, worn smooth, half buried in the dirt. I leaned down and wiped the dirt away, and there it was. The name carved into the wood was faded, but I could still make it out. Tommy Bell. Now, Tommy Bell wasn't a name I'd heard much about, but my father used to tell stories about how Tommy Bell had gone missing years ago, just up and vanished. No one knew what happened to him, and no one talked about it much. The name faded from memory like dust in the wind, but there it was, in front of me, clear as day. I should have stopped right there. I should have walked away, but curiosity got the best of me. I pulled the marker out and looked around. The air felt colder than it had before, the kind of chill that crawls up your spine. Then the earth beneath me shifted again, like something was pushing its way to the surface. And that's when I saw it. The dirt around the grave was moving slowly, like something inside was trying to get out. My heart skipped a beat, and I took a step back, not sure what I was seeing. I couldn't explain it. I thought about calling my uncle, but I knew he'd just laugh at me. So I covered it up, piled the dirt back over the grave, and put the marker where I'd found it. I figured it was just an old story, nothing more than a memory that time had buried. But I couldn't shake the feeling, not for a long time. I went back to that spot every day for a week, just to see if anything was different. But each time, everything was quiet, still, as if nothing had ever happened. The ground never moved again, not that I could tell, and yet I still feel it. Sometimes, when the night is still and the wind picks up, I swear I hear that hum again. It's faint, like a whisper carried on the breeze, and it always seems to come from the ground. From the place where Tommy Bell was buried. Sometimes I think it's just the earth remembering something it wasn't supposed to forget. But then again, maybe it's just me. All I know is, some graves weren't meant to be found. And some things are better left undisturbed. So I don't go to that spot anymore. I don't even walk close. But every now and then, when I'm sitting on the porch late at night, I think I hear the earth calling, like it's asking for something. Something it's been waiting for a long time. And I can't help but wonder what happens when you answer. My name is Earl Jenkins, and I'm from a little town called Marble Falls, Texas. Not much to it, just a stretch of road. A couple of old gas stations, and the creek running by the edge of town. A place where people don't rush much, and the days blend together one after the other, like the dust on the porch steps. I've lived here most of my life, and in all my years, there's only one thing that still gives me a restless feeling when I think back on it. Something that happened one night long ago. I guess it was around the late 70s, when I was a young man, just a kid really. I'd been working for the county, fixing fences and hauling hay, and I had this old Chevy truck that could barely turn over in the mornings. You know, the kind the engine would sputter and cough like it was ready to give up on you. But it always started, eventually. Just had to wait for it to feel like working. It was late in the summer when it happened, and the air had that smell of rain on dirt. The kind you know is coming, but never quite shows up. I had been driving back from an old farm out near the edge of town, a place I'd worked on a few times. It was a quiet drive, that stretch of road with nothing but the occasional cow and a lot of wide-open sky. My headlights cut through the dusk, and that's when I saw it, just up ahead at the old gate by the cemetery. There was this lantern hanging from a post. Now, I don't know about you, but you don't usually see lanterns out there. Not unless someone's working or coming to visit. This one, though, was flickering. Not like a normal light, but slow and offbeat, like it didn't know what it wanted to be. I didn't think much of it at first. Hell, there were a lot of strange things in Marble Falls. Things that didn't make sense but didn't bother anyone too much. I've lived here long enough to know that. But something about that lantern stuck with me. I don't know why I didn't just drive past it like I usually would. Maybe it was the way the light danced in the night, how it almost seemed like it was calling me. So I stopped. Didn't have any real reason to, but I did. I pulled the truck over, and the engine rattled and coughed before going quiet. The night was still, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something. I got out and walked up to the gate. That lantern was hanging there, swinging just a little in the breeze, but there wasn't a soul in sight. The thing about Marble Falls is, it's small. If someone's out there, you're gonna see them. But no one was there. Just the lantern flickering and swaying. I figured maybe it was some old fool who'd left it burning too long, but I couldn't shake that feeling in my chest. I walked closer, and the closer I got, the more that feeling grew. Like something was ... wrong. The lantern was still, but it felt like it was alive. I don't know how to explain it. I reached out to touch it, thinking maybe the wind had made it swing like that. But the moment my hand got close, the wind stopped. Everything went still. My heart started thumping in my chest, and I couldn't move for a moment. I don't know why. It was like the whole world had gone quiet, like the air itself was holding its breath. I pulled my hand back, and then, out of nowhere, I heard something. A whisper, like a voice in the back of my head. Soft, like it wasn't meant to be heard. It was just a word. Leave. I don't know if it was my mind playing tricks, or if the lantern was somehow speaking to me. But I turned and ran back to the truck faster than I thought I could move. I started it up, and the engine cranked louder than usual, like it was glad to be going. I didn't look back, but I could feel something following me. I felt it all the way home, like a cold hand on the back of my neck. I tried to forget about it after that, but that lantern, it stuck with me. Every night after that, when I'd drive that road, I'd see it again. Same place, same flickering light, but never anyone around. And it wasn't always in the same spot either. Some nights it was by the gate, other nights it was farther in the cemetery. I'd stop sometimes, get out. But every time, the same feeling would creep up on me like something was watching, waiting. And no matter how many times I went back, I never found a reason for it. It didn't make sense. I finally asked old Marge Wilson about it one evening. She'd lived in Marble Falls her whole life, knew every inch of the place. She didn't look at me when I asked, just kept stirring her coffee like she didn't hear me. But she did, I could tell. Finally, after a long pause, she said, "Some things are just meant to stay where they are, Earl. Don't go looking too hard. You won't find what you want." She said it with that kind of finality that makes you want to drop the subject right there, but I kept thinking about it. Over time, the lantern stopped showing up. It wasn't the kind of thing that would just go away, though. I knew it wasn't. There are places like that, where things happen and you can't make sense of them no matter how long you live. The world has its ways, and some things are meant to stay hidden. I've never told anyone else about that lantern, and I don't reckon I will. But sometimes, when I drive down that road, I still see the glow of it way off in the distance. I don't stop anymore. I don't even slow down. There's no point in trying to understand something that's not meant to be understood. Some things just are. Sometimes I think about the people in that cemetery, the ones buried there. And I wonder if they ever got where they were supposed to go, or if they're still waiting, just like that lantern, waiting for someone to notice them. I can't help but feel like I never really left that night. It's like part of me is still there, standing at that gate, watching the light flicker. The porch light hums behind me, the wind whispers through the trees, and for a moment, I wonder if it's still out there, waiting for someone to stop. But I know I won't be the one to see it again. Some things just stay where they are, and some things you never fully leave behind. My name is Everett Davis, and I'm from a little town called Brackettville, Texas. It's not much of a place, just a few old houses, a couple of streets that roll into the dirt roads, and more cows than people, but it's home, or at least it used to be. Now, I reckon there's only a handful of folks who still live there. It's mostly older ones like me, and the younger folks who come back for a bit after they've been out to the cities. It's the kind of place where, if you don't know somebody, you'll find out pretty quick who they are. And if you do know them, well, you've known them all your life. I was born in Brackettville, raised up there, and I stayed until the world moved on, and I didn't really have a choice anymore. But, sometimes I still go back. There's a reason for that. It's something that's been there, hanging over me like the weight of one of them summer thunderstorms that never quite lets go. I don't tell folks much about it, but I reckon it's about time. I'd been gone a while, a lot of years, but I was driving through that area a few months ago, and I felt something pulled me back. I guess, in a way, I was looking for something, but I couldn't say what. It wasn't a need for answers. Not exactly, but maybe for the feeling of home. When you've been somewhere all your life, you don't really understand what it means until it's not there no more. I'd been out in the world long enough to know that, even if I couldn't quite wrap my head around it. Anyway, I drove back to Brackettville late one evening, just after the sun had set. It was a hot summer night, that kind of heat that sticks to your skin like it's trying to hold you down. I drove past the old places, the post office, the old school, the church. Most of it had changed, though. No one hardly uses the old gas station anymore, and that old corner diner's been boarded up for years. But there's a stretch of land just outside of town where I used to walk, back when I was young. It's quiet there, and the only sound you'd hear was the wind, or maybe a bird off in the distance. And when you're alone, like I was that evening, it gets to feel like you've stepped out of time altogether. I don't know what got into me that night, but I decided to pull over near the old oak tree by the creek. It's just a big, old, twisted thing, but there's something about it that always pulled me in. I had a thermos of coffee with me, so I thought I might sit and have a drink while I watched the stars, maybe listen to the wind in the trees like I did when I was young. The truck creaked when I turned it off, and I just sat there for a bit, looking out at the land. It was calm, almost a calm, like everything was holding its breath. There's an old dirt road that cuts through the trees back there. And I remember thinking how strange it was that I hadn't seen anyone drive down it in so long. I wasn't thinking anything strange, just watching the way the trees cast shadows, the way the night felt like it was closing in a little. But then, I noticed something. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, the way the trees moved in the wind. But no, there was someone standing in the distance, just at the edge of the woods. I squinted, thinking maybe it was just an animal, or maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But the figure didn't move. It stayed still, just standing there. I didn't know who it was. I hadn't seen anyone else on this road for weeks, and there weren't any houses nearby, just open land. I don't know why I didn't leave right away, but I stayed there, watching, waiting to see if the person would move. After a long while, they didn't. So, I figured I'd drive on. I put the truck in gear, started it up, and the engine groaned, like it didn't want to go. It's old, that truck, but it gets me where I need to go. The thing is, as I pulled out, I glanced back just before I turned onto the main road. And there in the distance, I saw the figure again, standing by the oak tree this time. I don't know why it unsettled me so much, but I drove straight through town without stopping. Didn't even slow down at the old gas station. There was just something about the way that figure stood, like it was waiting for me, like it knew I was there. I tried not to think too much about it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Every time I passed through Brackettville, something felt off. Little things like how quiet the town was, or the way the wind would pick up in certain spots, how it would almost whisper. And every time I thought about that figure, it felt like I was being pulled back, like it was calling me. That was a couple of months ago. I didn't plan to go back, but last week I did. I don't know why. But I drove up that same road, and when I turned onto that dirt path again, I could feel it, the air felt thick, like it was about to storm. And there by the oak tree, I saw her again. She was closer this time, almost right by the trunk. Her face still turned toward me, but I couldn't see it clearly. Something about her seemed wrong, like she didn't belong there, like the land itself was rejecting her. But I was drawn to her, almost like I was supposed to be there, like I had no choice. I parked the truck and stepped out. The ground was soft, almost damp, and I could hear the sound of the creek in the distance. But there was something else. Something deeper, like the earth was murmuring. As I got closer, the figure turned toward me. It was an old woman, her hair long and white, her clothes simple, like something from a time long ago. But her eyes, they were the strangest things. Not in a bad way, but in a way that made me feel like I was seeing something I wasn't meant to see. Her eyes weren't just looking at me, they were seeing into me. And for a second I thought I might know her. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't fear. It was like a quiet knowing. She didn't say anything. Didn't move, just stood there, her gaze fixed on mine. And then, like the wind, she was gone. I didn't see her leave, didn't hear anything. One second she was there, and the next, there was nothing. I stood there a long time, just staring at the spot where she had been. And when I finally drove away, I didn't look back. I don't know what that woman was. Maybe a spirit, maybe just a figment of my imagination. But every time I pass by that old oak tree now, I feel it like there's something there watching. Maybe it's her. Maybe it's something else. But I know I'll never forget that feeling. The feeling of being seen. Sometimes when I'm sitting on my porch late at night, I think I hear her voice in the wind. I don't know if she's still out there. But I know I'll never be able to shake the feeling that I'm meant to go back to see her again. It's been years since I left Brackettville, but something about that night, about her, makes me think I'll always be tied to it, tied to that place. And maybe I'm meant to be. My name's Earl Hargrove, and I'm from a little place called Lamesa, Texas. It's the kind of town where the dust never really settles, and the wind has a way of picking up in the afternoon. making the dry fields look like they're alive. Now Lamisa's not much to look at, just a handful of streets, an old feed store on the corner, a gas station that's seen better days. But it's home. Or it was, anyhow. I've been gone a long time, living in the city for years now, but every so often I find myself driving back through, just to remember the way it felt to be a boy in that quiet, sun-baked town. The road I take in is the one that leads you past the old cemetery. And that's where I found something I don't quite know how to explain. You might say, I should have left it alone, but that's the thing about things like this. They don't always let you be. It was late in the evening, just after the sun had dipped below the horizon. I'd been sitting in my truck, parked by the side of the road, listening to the radio. That old thing barely worked, kept cutting in and out, but I didn't mind. The hum of the porch light at my old place still had the same sound when I was a boy. It reminded me of those slow evenings when the air still had a bit of heat to it. But it was starting to cool, and everything felt like it was just about to rest. I got out of the truck and took a walk through the cemetery. Not that many people go there anymore. The town's small, but it's even smaller when you're used to the city. But that cemetery, it's something else. I don't know how to say it, but there's a stillness there. Not just quiet, trill stillness, like the air is holding its breath. The kind of quiet that makes your skin feel like it's too tight. I wandered through the rows of gravestones, some leaning a bit, others barely standing. I knew the names, sure. A few folks from around town. But then, in the back corner of the place, I found a stone I'd never seen before. It was weathered, real worn down by the years, and set a little out of place, as if no one ever bothered to put it there on purpose. I don't know why it caught my eye, but something about it seemed off. It wasn't just the age of it, or the way the moss had crept up on it like it had been forgotten. No, it was something else. Something in the air, you might say. I didn't think much of it than just an old stone. I stood there a minute, looked around at the graveyard, and then headed back to my truck. But over the next few weeks, I found myself drawn back to that stone. It was odd, I know, but every time I passed by, the air around it felt ... warmer, not like the sun had hit it or anything like that. Just warmer. And every time, as I got closer, I could swear it felt like it was, calling me. I told myself it was just the heat getting to me. The heat does funny things to your mind out there in the desert. But I couldn't shake it. The feeling that the stone wanted something from me. It was like an itch I couldn't scratch, so I started walking out there on purpose, just to see if I could figure it out. After a while, I noticed something else about it. The stone, the more I looked at it, seemed to change just a little. The carving on the front of it, faint as it was, started to look clearer to me. Not words, no, nothing like that, but shapes. Shapes that didn't belong. They twisted a little in a way I couldn't quite describe, like they were trying to shift into something else, something I couldn't see. And then one night, I stood in front of it, and the air was so still. You could hear the sound of the wind through the mesquite trees far off in the distance. And that was when I heard it, just a soft noise, like something shifting beneath the ground. A kind of low hum. I can't tell you exactly why, but I knew right then that I had to see what was under that stone. I'm not sure why I felt that way, like it was pulling me, but I did. I went home that night and grabbed a shovel from the shed, and in the dark, I walked back to the cemetery. I'm not a young man anymore, and I wasn't sure what I thought I'd find, but I couldn't stop myself. I dug around the stone, not really knowing why, but feeling the pull with every shovel full of dirt. It was slow work, and my hands started to hurt, but I kept going. After a while, I hit something hard. A piece of stone, I thought at first, but when I brushed the dirt off, I saw it wasn't just a stone. It was the edge of a crypt, old and forgotten. I hadn't known it was there. No one had, I'm sure. The ground had shifted over it all those years. But there it was, a crypt hidden in the back corner of the cemetery, sealed away and left to time. I could feel something in the air, a heavy feeling that wasn't just the weight of the earth. It was like the air itself was pressing down on me, waiting for something. I opened the crypt, and inside, I found what had been there all along. A family, long gone, their remains scattered in ways that didn't seem right. Like the tomb hadn't been touched in 100 years. The air was cold inside, and the smell of damp earth and decay hit me hard. I don't know how long I stood there, but when I closed the crypt back up and covered it with dirt again, I knew something had changed. I didn't say anything to anyone. I left it alone, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. Every time I drive through La Mesa, I can see that corner of the cemetery in my mind. The stone's still there, still waiting. I've tried to forget it, but every now and then I swear I feel that pull again. Like it's calling me, even after all this time. Some things, I guess, are meant to stay buried. Some tombs are meant to stay sealed. I learned that the hard way. My name is Tommy Hudson, and I'm from a little town called El Dorado, Texas. It's tucked in the western part of the state, near the edge of the hill country, where the roads stretch out like the veins of a tired old hand. I've lived here all my life, and there's a quiet kind of peace to it, or at least there was. Back before the things I'll tell you about started. Now, I'm not much for tall tales, but what I'm about to share is true. It's something I never could explain, not even to myself, no matter how many years have gone by. Back when I was a young man, just out of high school, I worked the night shift at the gas station on the edge of town. It wasn't much, just a beat-up place with a creaky sign, the kind that flickered and hummed when the wind hit it just right, the kind of place where you'd sit on the front step with a thermos of coffee, watching the traffic that came through, which wasn't much, just the occasional trucker or late-night wanderer. The air always had that smell, like dust on the breeze and a hint of rain in the summer. A smell that settles in your bones if you're still enough to notice it. I remember this one night real clear. It was in the middle of summer, and the heat had left the town feeling like it was holding its breath, waiting for the rain that hadn't come yet. The cicadas were singing like they always do, and the porch light buzzed a bit, faint like it was trying to tell me something. I didn't think much of it, at least, not at first. The clock on the wall inside the station was ticking slow, just like it always did when it was quiet. And the only sound outside was the occasional rustle of leaves, like someone might have been walking by, but I never saw anybody. Then, right around midnight, a car pulled up. A little station wagon, dusty and worn. I didn't recognize it. The driver, a man about my age, maybe a little older, stepped out slow. Like he was tired, and he looked at me with these eyes. Eyes that were tired, but there was something else there too. Something like worry. He didn't come in at first. Just stood there by his car, staring at the gas pumps. Like he was trying to decide something. He came in after a minute, though, and I could tell right away he was nervous. Not just because he was a stranger. Plenty of those came through. No, there was something about the way he moved. Like he was carrying a weight he couldn't shake. He didn't speak much when he came up to the counter. Just asked for a file-up, and when I gave him the total, he looked away like he hadn't heard me. That's when I noticed the smell. It wasn't strong, but it was there, like the earth had been turned over. Like something had been buried too long and was starting to wake up. I filled his tank. And he paid with cash, just a few crumpled bills. But as I was handing him his change, he looked at me and asked me the strangest question. He said, "You ever hear the whispers, Tommy? In the night?" I thought he was just talking nonsense. Maybe a little drunk or tired. So I just nodded and said, "I've heard things. Everyone hears things now and then." But he didn't laugh, didn't even smile. He just stared at me, like he was waiting for something. "I thought I might," he said, but I wasn't sure. That's when the air seemed to change. It wasn't anything obvious, just a shift, like the world around me had tilted slightly. I felt it deep in my chest, like something was about to happen. But I couldn't put my finger on it. The man thanked me and drove off, leaving me standing there watching the dust settle behind him. I didn't think much of it after that, but I started to notice the odd things. Little things, mostly the way the wind felt colder at night. How sometimes the radio in the truck would fade in and out, the static sounding like whispers. And then there were the dreams. At first, they were just odd. Faces I didn't recognize, old places I'd never been. All of it dim and blurry. But after a while, I began to hear those whispers in the dreams. Sometimes I'd wake up with them still in my head. Soft, like a murmur just beyond reach. But ... insistent. It went on for weeks, and no matter what I did, it wouldn't stop. I'd be out at the station working late, and I'd hear the whispers in the wind. Or I'd be walking down the street, and I'd feel like someone was just behind me. Always quiet, never loud enough to hear with my ears, but it was there. A sound just beneath everything else. After a while, I didn't want to be alone anymore. I'd keep the radio on all night, even though I knew it wouldn't help. The voice on the radio, it was just static too. Then, one night, I finally saw it. I was walking back to my truck after locking up for the night. I saw a figure standing out by the edge of the highway, just past the old cemetery. I couldn't tell what it was at first, just a shadow in the dark. But as I got closer, I saw the shape of a man standing there watching me. His clothes were old, like something from another time, and his face was pale, almost sickly. But his eyes were the same as the man who'd come into the station that night. The same tired eyes, full of worry. I called out to him, but he didn't move. Just stood there, staring at me like he was waiting for me to understand something. I don't know how long I stood there. I could feel the weight of those eyes, and I felt that coldness in the air again. It was as if something had been waiting, and now it had come to claim its answer. I left then. Didn't even look back. And when I came back to town the next morning, I couldn't find the cemetery. It was like it was never there, like the road had turned, and I'd forgotten where I was. I've driven out there a dozen times since then, but it's always just empty fields now. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know why I still feel those eyes, or why the whispers come back every now and then when the wind picks up. But I can tell you this much. There's something out there, something that waits, something old, something that's been around longer than any of us. And no matter how far I drive, no matter how many years pass, I know it's still there, watching sometimes. When I sit out on my porch late at night, with the crickets singing and the wind whispering through the mesquite, I think I hear those whispers again. Just under the hum of the porch light, soft and distant, like they're trying to remind me of something I can't ever forget. I don't know what it is, but every time I swear I can hear a voice, just faint enough to make me wonder if I'm hearing it right. If it's something I've missed all these years, you ever get that feeling someone's there, even when you can't see them? That's how it feels. Every time. My name is Jim Walker, and I'm from a little town called Jacksboro. Texas is not much more than a crossroads. Really, with a gas station that's seen better days, a few scattered houses, and a long stretch of dirt roads where you can drive 4 miles without seeing a single soul. I was just a boy when this happened, but I've never been able to shake it, no matter how many years have passed. It was one of those nights that was heavy with silence, the kind of quiet that gets inside you. I remember the air smelled like rain that hadn't quite come, just the promise of it, and the cicadas were buzzing louder than usual. It was late, almost midnight, and I was sitting on the front porch of the house I grew up in. The wooden boards creaking beneath me every time I shifted in my chair. The old porch light flickered above, humming faintly like it was struggling to keep going. It wasn't the most comfortable night, but the world always felt a little easier on those warm Texas nights. I had my thermos of coffee beside me, steam still rising from it, though I wasn't really drinking much. Just holding it, you know? It gave me something to do with my hands. I had a dog back then, a mutt named Blue, who was curled up at my feet, half sleeping. The sound of an engine sputtered in the distance, maybe a truck or a car. In Jacksboro, that sound meant something. Someone may be coming or going, and you'd know them by the engine sound. But that night, the engine just kept sputtering, growing quieter and quieter, like the world itself was swallowing it up. I don't know why, but I kept thinking about an old man who used to live a few miles out of town. His name was Roy Harris, and he had a place on the edge of town with a fence that was always sagging, like it couldn't hold itself up anymore. I don't remember when he died, but I do remember my mama saying he passed alone, just like he'd lived. I think that's why I couldn't let it go. That's why I decided to drive out there that night. It wasn't a smart thing to do, not in the dark, not out on those old roads where you can lose yourself pretty quick if you aren't careful. But something about it felt ... necessary. I don't know how else to say it. I left the porch light on, and I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Mama was asleep, and she didn't need to know. Not then. I didn't need anyone to ask questions. I just needed to go. When I got out to Roy's place, it was as quiet as I expected, Too quiet. The wind barely touched the mesquite trees, and the light from my truck barely cut through the dark. I parked out front, the engine of the truck struggling to shut off, and stepped out into the thick air. The ground was soft with dust and rain that never fell. The house looked just like it always did, tired, empty, but it felt different. Something was off. It wasn't the house, though. It was the land. It was the way the dirt shifted beneath my boots like it was trying to say something. Something I didn't understand. The air felt heavier too, thicker. I stood there for a long while, just staring at the place, before I noticed the small cemetery near the back of the property. There were a few headstones out there, none of them very fancy, just simple stones that had been weathered by years of wind and sun. I hadn't remembered it being there before. The thing is, I knew Roy had no family left, not since his wife passed. But something about that cemetery, ... It didn't sit right with me. So, I walked toward it. I figured I'd check it out, maybe say a prayer for Roy or something. It was the right thing to do, even if it didn't feel right. I don't know how to explain it, but the closer I got to those old stones, the colder it got. Not in a way that you'd feel from a change in the weather, but in a way that made your skin crawl. I stood in front of one of the graves, an unmarked one, barely visible in the dark, and I could have sworn I heard something. At first, I thought it was the wind, or maybe the creaking of the trees. But then I heard it again, a whisper. And it wasn't the wind. It was my name, Jim. I told myself I was imagining it, that I'd been driving too long, or that the quiet was just playing tricks on me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I don't know how long I stood there, but when I looked down at the grave again, I saw something I didn't notice before. A name. Just one word. Roy. But not Roy Harris. No, this one was different. It was Roy Walker. My last name. My family. I didn't know what to make of it. It didn't belong there, I told myself. But the longer I looked at it, the more real it felt. I don't know why, but I had to know more. I couldn't stop myself. I went back to the truck and pulled out the old records I kept in the glove box. Stuff about the town. The people who lived there. All of it. I flipped through it as fast as I could, heart beating like a drum in my chest. And there it was, a mention of a Roy Walker, buried right there on that land. But there was no record of his death. No mention of why he was there. It didn't make sense. I felt my breath catch in my throat. I couldn't explain it, but something told me that grave, that name, it wasn't just a coincidence. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't alone anymore. That night, I drove back to town without saying a word. Mama didn't ask where I'd been, and I didn't tell her. I just went inside, sat down, and tried to forget. But it's been years now, and every time I think about it, I hear that whisper in my head. Jim, just my name, calling out from that forgotten grave. I haven't gone back to Roy's place since then, and I reckon I never will. Some things, they stay buried, whether we want them to or not. Some things, they just wait. You ever get that feeling that someone's been watching you, even when you're sure you're alone? That's how I feel now. I reckon that grave is still out there, waiting for someone else to ask the questions. But not me. Not again. My name is Luther Harris, and I'm from a little town called Shiner, Texas. Now, if you've ever been through there, you'll know it's quiet. Real quiet. It's the kind of place where the most excitement you get is the parade during the summer or the lights. Flickering on the old main street, and that's how it was back then too when I was just a kid. It's a town that's always felt the same, like it's frozen in time. But I'll tell you, there's a spot I remember. It's a little stretch of road just outside of town, where the air always felt thicker than it had any right to. It was nothing special, just a lonely winding path that passed by the old church cemetery. The road was rough, and the grass had a way of getting overgrown in the summertime. It's the kind that'd stick to your boots and make the truck engine sputter when you tried to start it. I was in my 20s when I first noticed it, though I never told anyone. It wasn't something I liked to talk about. There was something strange about the cemetery, something that didn't sit right with me. It wasn't the cemetery itself, it was the way it always felt like it was watching me. The thing about the cemetery was, it had an old iron gate that was always closed. Or at least it should have been. It was supposed to be locked. But every time I drove by, without fail, the gate was wide open, like someone was expecting me. I tried to tell myself it was just the wind, or maybe the chain had rusted, but it never felt like it was just a mistake. You'd drive down that stretch, and something deep in your gut would tug at you, telling you to keep your eyes on the road. But it always pulled me in, no matter how hard I tried to ignore it. Most nights, after my shift at the diner, I'd take the long way home just to avoid it, though that never worked. The road was always there, waiting for me, and no matter how I drove past it, it always felt like it was waiting for me to look. I remember one night, though. It was a warm evening, late in the summer, just before the real heat set in. The sky was thick with humidity, and the wind had started picking up, enough to make the mesquite trees shake and groan. The hum of the porch light was the only sound as I sat on the steps, drinking coffee out of a thermos. The smell of rain was in the air, and the cicadas were starting to slow down, like they could feel the night coming. It was then I noticed it again, the open gate. Something about it that night felt different, like it wasn't just waiting for me. It was beckoning. I tried to shake it off, thought maybe it was the heat or lack of sleep, but that feeling, it just wouldn't go away. I decided to take a drive, just to clear my head. Maybe get a little farther out of town and forget about the cemetery for a bit. The old truck roared to life, the engine sputtering at first, but it finally caught, and I was on my way. The road was dark, and the air was thick with dust, swirling in the headlights. When I reached the stretch by the cemetery, the truck's engine died out, just like that, out of nowhere. I sat there for a minute, tapping my fingers on the wheel, and stared at that gate. It was wide open again, but this time something was different. There were no sounds. The usual crickets, the distant hum of the highway, the rustle of the trees, they were all gone. Like everything had just stopped. I can't explain it, but I swear, it was as though the whole world had gone quiet just for a moment, just for me. My heart started thumping in my chest. I tried to start the truck again, but it wouldn't budge. That's when I saw it out of the corner of my eye, in the cemetery, just beyond the gate. There was movement. Something shifting. I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but then I saw it clear as day. A figure. A man, I think, though I couldn't see his face. He was walking along the rows of tombstones, but not like someone would walk if they were visiting a loved one. It wasn't slow, and it wasn't respectful. It was like he was searching, pacing, moving between the stones, like he was looking for something or someone. My hands gripped the wheel tighter. I don't know why, but I knew I had to leave. I tried to start the truck again, my heart racing now, but it wouldn't turn over. That's when the radio flickered to life on its own. Static first, then a voice, real faint. I could barely make it out, but it sounded like it was saying my name. And then just like that, the truck's engine roared back to life. I slammed my foot on the gas, tearing away from that place, not looking back once. I didn't tell anyone about that night. Not at first, anyway. I figured it was just the heat, or maybe exhaustion. But it wasn't the last time I saw that figure, nor was it the last time the gate was open. Every time I passed, I saw the same thing. The same figure, the same pacing. It wasn't until years later I found out the truth. The cemetery, it wasn't always a cemetery. There were unmarked graves there, a burial ground from a long time ago, when the town was just a handful of shacks and cattle. People who'd come through, but never left. It was an old story, something folks didn't talk about too much. I suppose the dead, they don't care much for being forgotten. It was something I didn't understand then, but now, well, now I know. Sometimes when I drive by there, I still see the figure, and I see that gate wide open, waiting. The rest of the cemetery's quiet, but that one spot, that one part of it tits never still. Some places are meant to be forgotten, but I guess not all of them are. And some things, they don't ever really leave. They just wait. My name is Alvin Ray, and I'm from a little place called Miller's Creek, just south of San Angelo. You've probably never heard of it, but it's one of those towns where the kind of quiet lingers on long after the sun's gone down, and the only thing that breaks the silence is the wind. That's how it was back then too, when I first came to know the place maybe a little too quiet for comfort. This was back when I was younger, around the age when you start thinking you've got it all figured out, but life has a way of proving you wrong. You see, I used to take a lot of walks, mostly in the evenings. Just one of those habits I picked up. I'd put on my boots, grab my thermos, and head out across the creek, through the mesquite trees. Just listening to the crickets, the wind through the grass. It was peaceful. I liked it like that. It wasn't until later that I began to notice something. Odd. You see, I had this routine. This place I'd walk through every evening. A small cemetery on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just some old stone markers weathered with age. The kind of cemetery where the grass is long and you can smell the magnolias in the air, mixing with that earthy scent when the ground starts to dampen after a rain. Now, I wasn't one for the kind of people who go strolling through cemeteries at all hours of the day, but this place, it was different. It felt like a spot where the world was holding its breath, just waiting for something to happen. And sometimes I'd feel like I was part of that breath, that stillness. I'd walk along the rows of tombstones, nodding at names I didn't recognize, all the while thinking about how quiet it was, how long it had been since the last visitor had come by. Most folks didn't bother much with it anymore. The old folks would pass through now and then, but that was it. I could tell that it was a place everyone had forgotten, just another patch of forgotten earth. But there was this one evening, maybe the first sign, now that I think about it, that I knew something had changed. I'd been out walking as usual, the air heavy and warm, the kind of stillness you only get in late spring. The sun had set, and the sky was just beginning to take on that deep purple, like the night was stretching out across the land. I had my hands shoved in my jacket pockets, my boots kicking up little clouds of dust when I first heard it. Footsteps. They were soft at first, barely there, and I thought maybe it was my mind playing tricks on me. I told myself it was the wind or the trees shifting. But then it came again. Louder this time, 1, 2, 3 steps, following right in line with my own. Now, it's funny, but the first thing I thought was, well, maybe somebody else is out here too. But when I looked around, there wasn't a soul in sight. Just me and the old stones. Still, I didn't let myself get spooked. I just kept walking, telling myself it was nothing. But the steps kept following. Step for step, just behind me. And there's something about that kind of silence, ... When you know you're alone, and yet something else is with you, that kind of quiet is unsettling in a way you can't quite put into words. The moon had started rising by then, casting everything in that soft silver light, and I kept walking, my boots kicking at the dirt, trying to ignore the growing sense of something not quite right, and that's when it happened. Something I can't explain. I was walking past one of the older graves when I noticed the ground seemed disturbed, like someone had recently been there. The stone wasn't cracked, but it was leaning just a little, like it had been knocked off kilter. Now, I'm no historian, but I had walked past that same spot dozens of times, and I'd never seen anything like it. So, out of curiosity, I stepped closer, brushing aside the overgrown weeds. That's when I saw the name. And let me tell you, it sent a chill right down my spine. The name wasn't familiar, didn't belong to any of the old families from around here. It read like a forgotten soul, one who had no business being in that place. The grave marker was just a simple stone, no engraving, just the name. But the thing is, the name was too familiar. It was my name. Not Alvin Ray, mind you, but close enough Alvin Rayburn. Now, I don't know how that can be, how that stone came to be there, or why it was there at all. But I'll tell you this, it wasn't there the last time I walked through. I stared at it for a long time, trying to make sense of it, but it felt like the air had thickened around me, like the whole cemetery was holding its breath. Then came the footsteps again. Step, step, step. I turned around real slow, expecting to see someone standing there. But there was nothing, just the same old trees and gravestones. No one. And I don't know why, but I started walking again, faster now, trying to put some distance between myself and that spot, between myself and the feeling creeping up my spine. I didn't stop walking, not until I was back by the creek, the sound of the water louder in my ears than the steps behind me. But they were still there. Even as I crossed over that old wooden bridge, the sound of those steps stayed with me, fading with every step I took, but not fading enough. It was as if something was waiting for me, waiting to walk beside me. I don't know why, but I can't get that feeling out of my head. You ever get that sense that something's been following you, just waiting for the right moment to show itself? Sometimes when I go back there, I still hear those footsteps behind me. And I'll tell you, I've come to believe that cemeteries never been just for the dead. It's for the ones who think they've left too. The ones who keep walking, like they never really left at all. I'm not sure what I saw or heard that night, but I can tell you, I don't think I'm meant to walk alone. My name is Billy Ray Jenkins, and I'm from a little place called Pecan Gap, Texas. It's the kind of town that most folks just pass through, but to me it's home, always has been. I've lived there all my life, and every inch of that land has a story tied to it. Even the quiet stretches of road where the dust swirls and the sun burns all day long. I can remember back when I was young. The old truck I drove out to the fields would sputter and groan when I tried to start it. And I'd cuss it under my breath. But there was a comfort in that, too. That truck and the fields. And the same porch light that hummed softly at night when the cicadas were singing it all felt like it would always be there. Like things never changed. But that night, something did. I'd been sitting on the porch just like I do most nights after supper. The air smelled like rain, but you couldn't see any clouds. Just the kind of warm, still evening where the world feels like it's waiting for something, you know? I was sipping on my coffee, thinking about the folks I knew who had passed on. So many of them knowing. I couldn't help but think about how much quieter it had gotten. The air seemed a little thicker than usual, like there was something heavy on it. You ever get that feeling someone's there, even when you can't see them? That's how it felt that night. It was just me and the wind. But something about the quiet felt too still. The radio on the porch was buzzing faintly, and the sound of it faded in and out. You could hear the rustling of the leaves in the trees, and the occasional dog barking far off, but there was no one on the road, no cars passing by. I think it was around 9:30 or so when I saw him. At first I thought it was just the wind playing tricks on my eyes, or maybe I was imagining things. There was this figure standing by the old barn at the far edge of the field. Not too far, but far enough. He was standing still, just looking at me, or maybe looking past me, I couldn't tell. I didn't get up right away, just sat there watching him. Maybe it was the dim light, or maybe the heat from the day was still messing with my head. But it felt like he was glowing somehow, like he wasn't quite a part of the land. Like he was ... different. I've seen plenty of folks walking out there in the dark. People who've had too much to drink or are just out for a midnight walk, but this felt different. There was something wrong about the way he stood, like he didn't belong to the earth beneath him. Something about it felt old. Real old. Like the land itself had remembered him, but he'd forgotten it. I told myself it was just the wind, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. My heart started picking up pace, and I rubbed my eyes thinking maybe I'd just been sitting there too long, losing track of time. But when I looked again, he hadn't moved. He was still standing there, and I could feel that chill start creeping down my neck. The kind that comes from a feeling you can't shake, even if you try. I don't know how long I stared at him, but when he finally did move, it was slow. It's almost like he was dragging his feet through the dust. His boots were making a soft, dragging sound as he walked closer. And that's when I saw it. He had on that old army jacket, one of the ones you see at the veterans' graves, all worn down and faded from years of wear. I'd seen that jacket before, on someone I knew. I couldn't see his face, not really, but there was something about his posture, the way he walked, that made my heart drop right into my stomach. He looked just like my friend Johnny Lee. Johnny had been my best buddy back when I served. He was the kind of guy who never complained, never said much, but you could always count on him. He didn't come back from Vietnam. I'd buried him myself up at the old cemetery. And now, here he was, walking down the path toward me. My breath caught in my throat, and my hands started shaking around that old thermos of coffee. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it. Johnny was dead. I'd watched him die, felt the weight of his absence in that empty room when they told me. I never thought I'd see him again, but there he was, just as I remembered him. walking through the dust like he hadn't gone anywhere. The closer he got, the more certain I was. That was Johnny, no mistake. But how? I tried to call out to him, but the words wouldn't come. My throat was dry, my voice stuck in my chest. He didn't say a word, just kept walking, slow and deliberate, until he stopped right in front of me. And that's when I saw it, his eyes. I could see them just faintly catching the moonlight. They looked empty, like there was nothing left behind them but darkness. For a second, it felt like time had stopped. Like we were the only two people left in the world. And then, just as quick as he'd appeared, he turned and started walking back toward the field. I didn't move, didn't say anything, just watched him fade back into the night. His boots dragging along the dirt like he had all the time in the world. He didn't look back. And when he disappeared, the air felt lighter. But that weight, that sense of him being there, it stayed. I don't know what it was, and I don't know if anyone else would have seen him if they were sitting there that night. But I can tell you this much. Some soldiers never leave their post. I never went back to that spot again. I don't think I could. Sometimes, when I drive past that old field, I still see the light on in the distance, flickering in the wind, like someone's waiting for something. Maybe waiting for me. Maybe waiting for someone else. I don't know. But I do know this. There's some things in this world that never leave. They just stay somewhere just out of reach, waiting for the right time to remind you that they're still there. Still waiting. My name is Walter Bell, and I'm from Hicko, Texas. It's a small town. One of those places where everyone knows everyone. And if you drive through, you might miss it if you blink. We got a few shops, a gas station that still sells those big glass bottles of Coke, and a cemetery where folks who've lived here a long time are laid to rest. But I've lived here all my life. And there's something about this place that's always been ... quiet. Not the kind of quiet where you can sit on the porch and hear the wind in the trees. No, it's a different kind. It's the kind of quiet that sits on your chest and makes you feel like maybe you've been left behind, forgotten. Now, I don't mean to scare you, but there's something that happened to me once. Something that never quite sat right with me, and I suppose, after all these years, I might as well tell it. It was back when I was still working at the hardware store. We were short-staffed that day, and I ended up locking up late just as the sun was starting to dip behind the hills. I didn't mind it much. I liked that time of day, when the light starts to soften and the world gets quiet. That night, though, was different. The wind had picked up, and the air smelled like rain was coming, though the sky stayed clear. I remember walking out of the store, my boots kicking up dust on the old concrete sidewalk. The sound of a distant dog barking echoed, and I could hear the faint buzz of the porch light on the old gas station across the street. It was that kind of night, the kind where the world felt like it was holding its breath. I was heading back to my truck when I noticed something odd by the cemetery gate. There's a row of old weathered tombstones just at the edge of the cemetery, hidden behind some mesquite trees. It's a place folks don't much visit anymore. Too many old memories, I suppose. But this night I saw something that caught my eye. A light, soft and flickering, coming from between two of the graves. It wasn't the moon. This light had a kind of pulse to it. I stopped for a moment, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up just a little. I told myself it was probably some kids messing around, but something about it didn't sit right. So, I walked closer, my boots heavy on the gravel path. As I neared the gate, I saw what it was. There, between those old tombstones, was a single candle, burning bright in the wind. But that's not what made my stomach drop. It was the fact that the candle was sitting on top of a fresh grave. I'm talking fresh, like it had been dug that very day. No stone, no marker, just dirt piled up around it, soft and dark. Now I'd known those graves. They were older than anyone in town could remember, but this one wasn't on any list. The feeling hit me then, that quiet, deep feeling you can't explain. The kind where you feel like you're not supposed to be there. I don't know why, but I stepped closer. The wind picked up, making the trees creak like they were groaning. I could almost swear the ground beneath my feet shifted just a little, and then I heard it. A soft thud, like something heavy falling into the dirt just behind me. I turned quick, my heart racing, but there was nothing. Just the wind, the trees, and that damn candle. I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't know if I wanted to. But something about that place pulled at me, and before I knew it, I was kneeling beside the grave. The dirt was soft in my hands, still warm from the digging. That's when I saw the marks, tiny scratches, like nails dragging through the earth. Not deep, but enough to know they weren't made by nature. They were ... deliberate. My chest tightened. I stood up fast and backed away, like maybe I was starting to realize that some things weren't meant to be seen. And that candlelit was still burning, flickering like it had been waiting for me. I didn't touch it. I didn't get any closer. I turned and left, but not before I heard something, just as I crossed the street to my truck. A soft voice, like a whisper, carried by the wind. I've never been one to believe in things that go bump in the night. I've spent my life fixing fences, selling nails, and watching the same cows wander the same pastures. But I can't explain what happened that night. I can't tell you why I was drawn to that grave or why I felt that cold hand on the back of my neck. But I can tell you this. I've never gone back to that cemetery. Not after dark. And every time I drive past that gate, I see that light flickering in the distance. Even though I know it's impossible for it to still be there. Some things are better left alone. Some tombs, I reckon, are best left untouched. My name is Gus Turner, and I'm from a little town called Pittsburgh, Texas. Now, I know what you're thinking. Pittsburgh, Texas. Ain't that a funny coincidence? And it is, sure. But that's the name of it. You blink, and you miss it. There's not much there, just a few houses, a feed store, a gas station with a faded sign, one of them old motels that looks like it hasn't seen a visitor since before the last storm rolled through. But it was home for me, and for my folks before me. My daddy worked the land, and my mama ran the small store out by the highway. And there's a quiet to that place, a calm that gets under your skin after a while. It was on one of them nights, not too long after I retired, that I had the thought to go back. I hadn't been there in years. But something about the silence of my own home made me feel like I was missing something. Like I had to go back and remember it all before it was gone. So I drove down those old back roads, the truck engines sputtering and groaning like it had been sitting too long. That old engine of mine never sounded as strong as it used to. Still, it got me there. And the whole time I felt this weight in my chest. Like I was driving towards something, not just some little town in the middle of nowhere. I knew it was silly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for me there. When I pulled up, the porch light of the house still flickered, just like I remembered. It had a hum to it, a soft buzzing sound. And I couldn't help but stand there for a minute, listening to the wind and the rustling leaves. The cicadas were out in full force, and that sound, that worry, it felt like the whole world was still. I could almost feel the dust that clung to the air, the kind of dust that settles in your bones when you've been around too long. I walked up to the door, and it creaked when I pushed it open, the smell of old wood and dried flowers filling my nose. I swear it hadn't changed a bit. Not in all these years. I took a seat on the porch just like I used to when I was younger. There was a thermos of coffee inside, still warm enough to sip from, so I did. I hadn't even thought to bring it with me, but I suppose I didn't need to. It was there like it had always been, waiting for me. I don't know how long I sat there, but the wind picked up again, and that's when I noticed it. Something didn't feel right. It wasn't the wind or the light or the creak of the porch. It was the air, like it had thickened somehow, holding on to something old, something I couldn't name. I stood up, feeling a little off balance, and went around the back. That's when I saw the old cemetery. It's not far from the house, tucked behind a line of oak trees. There's a low fence, rusted in places, but the graves, well, they've always been there. My folks are buried there, and my granddad too. We always took care of it, even when we were kids. But this time, something pulled me toward it like I hadn't been there in ages. I don't know if it was the fog creeping in, or the way the old stones looked in the dim light, but I felt like I had to go. So I did. The cemetery was quiet, and the mist made the place feel like it was standing still in time. I walked through, feeling that same weight in my chest, but deeper now. That's when I saw the crypt. It was at the back of the cemetery, half hidden behind some ivy, its stone cracked in places, but still standing firm. I'd never seen it before. It wasn't the kind of thing you forget. It felt familiar, like I had seen it in a dream, but I couldn't place it. My breath caught in my throat. There was something about it, like it was waiting for me to notice. I stepped closer. The air around the crypt felt thick, like something was pressing in on me. I couldn't tell you what made me think it, but I felt like someone was watching me. The world had gone quiet again, and the wind had stopped. It was too still. I felt my heart beat a little faster as I reached out to touch the stone. And when my fingers brushed against it, I saw something. Not with my eyes, but in my mind. A flash. A face. Familiar but distant. I pulled my hand back, and I swear to you I saw the name on the crypt's plaque. It was mine. Or something like it. It was a name I didn't know, yet it felt so close, like a memory that had been buried for too long. I took a step back, feeling that pressure in my chest grow. I wanted to turn and walk away, but something stopped me. There was this pull, like I had to understand, had to know what it was, what was calling me there. And that's when the visions started. I didn't see them with my eyes, not really, but I felt them. I saw shadows moving between the trees, and the air seemed to shimmer. I heard whispers, quiet and soft, like they were trying to tell me something I didn't want to hear. I don't know how long I stood there, but it was long enough for the sun to set. And by the time I realized what was happening, the sky had turned dark. I turned to leave, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The wind had picked up again, but it was different, like it was carrying something with it. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like time itself had been bent somehow, twisted in ways that didn't make sense. I didn't know why I was standing there in front of that crypt, feeling like I was being pulled into something older than me, something older than all of us. I don't know if I'll ever understand it, but I can tell you this, some histories can't be erased. They follow you, even when you think you've left them behind. And some things wait for you in the dark, in the quiet places where time feels like it's standing still. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can feel that pull, that whisper of time slipping away, just out of reach. Maybe it's always been there. Maybe it always will be. I don't know. But I do know one thing, that place, that crypt, it'll always be there, waiting, and so will I suppose. My name is Willard Turner, and I'm from a little place called Tilden, Texas. Ain't much to it, really. A gas station, a couple of stores, and the old courthouse where they still hang the county fair ribbons up in the front window. It's the kind of town where folks go on living their lives. Nobody much notices unless it's the 4th of July or the rain's been coming down too long. Now, I ain't one for telling stories, but I reckon there's something to be said for sharing memories every now and then, even ones you can't quite explain. I'll try to make it quick, but I'll tell you now, it's been a long time, and it still don't sit right with me. It was around this time of year, late summer, when the days get long and the air starts sticking to your skin like sweat you can't shake off. I had an old Chevy pickup back then, and it was getting near time to replace the battery for the 4th time that year. But that truck, it had a way of starting when it needed to. You'd turn that key and pray it'd start up, and more often than not, it did. You know how it is in small towns, people don't ask questions, not unless you give them a reason. And that's what I liked about Tilden. It was quiet. People minded their business. But one night, when the wind was quiet and the crickets weren't making their usual racket, something changed. I was driving home from town, down that long stretch of dirt road between the gas station and my place. The headlights of that truck just barely cut through the dark, and the sound of the engine was all you could hear besides the wind brushing through the mesquite. I'd always liked driving out there at night when the world seemed to hush and the stars hung low enough to touch. But this night, the air felt different. Not wrong exactly, just heavy. I'm not one to get nervous, but I'll tell you, I had this feeling like someone was watching. Now, I don't mean to sound like a fool, but I had that sense in the pit of my stomach. You ever get that? The feeling that there's someone out there, just out of sight, watching you like they know you're coming? That's what it was like. I kept driving, though. Didn't stop. Didn't even slow down. But that feeling, it didn't go away. And then I saw it. About halfway down that road, I saw someone standing by the side of the old church, just past the tree line where the road turns. Now, I knew most folks who lived out there, and this wasn't anyone I recognized. I could barely see him at first, just a shape, like someone tall, maybe wearing a coat. At least I thought they were wearing a coat. But that didn't make sense, because it was still so hot that night. And no one in their right mind would wear a coat at that hour in that kind of heat. I didn't know what to think, but something told me to keep going. So I did. I thought maybe it was just someone passing through. But every time I drove past that stretch of road, I saw them. Same spot, same figure. Never moved, no matter what time of night it was. I don't know if I was just tired or if I was imagining things. But there was something about that figure that started to stick with me. And every time I'd pass, it felt like they were staring right at me. Not the way someone might glance as you drive by, but like they were waiting for you to come around that bend. And that's when I started seeing it more clearly. The figure wasn't just standing there, it was waiting. It wasn't the way you'd expect, though. You know how you might stand outside a place, waiting for someone to show up, just looking out at the horizon? It wasn't like that. This figure, they were watching me, like they knew I was coming. Like they knew I'd always be there, and they had all the time in the world to wait. I don't know how long it went on like that, but I'll tell you, the closer I got to home, the less I wanted to pass by that stretch of road. But then something happened. One evening, just as the sun was setting behind the hills, I saw it, no, felt it. I could feel that figure watching me, even though I wasn't anywhere near the church. I thought maybe I was losing my mind, and I told myself, don't be stupid. It's just the heat. It's just the dark. But deep down, I knew better. You ever feel like you can't shake something? Like it gets inside you? I couldn't get away from that feeling. So one day, I decided I'd stop. I'd pull over and see what it was. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe to see a person standing there, maybe something else. But when I pulled over, the road was empty. Nothing, just the wind. And the faint hum of the far-off radio station on the truck speakers. I walked down that road to where I had seen the figure standing so many times before. And when I got there, I looked around. Nothing at all. Not a sound. Just the smell of dirt and old wood. I thought I'd imagined the whole thing, but then I saw it. There, on the ground, was a small patch of grass, fresh but twisted. Like something had been standing there for a long time, and it had never been touched by the sun. I don't know what it means. I don't know if it means anything at all. But I left that spot and didn't go back for a long while. And when I did, the figure was gone. I haven't seen it since. But sometimes when I'm out there driving that same stretch of road, I can feel it. That presence. Like something's still waiting. Like it's still out there and I'm just the next person to pass by. It's a funny thing, feeling watched. You can tell yourself you're just imagining it, that it's nothing. But deep down, you know something's there. You know it's been waiting a long time, and it ain't going anywhere. So I guess I've learned to leave things alone. Some things, you just don't question. You just drive on past, and you don't look too hard. The world's big, and it's quiet, and you don't always know what's out there. But sometimes you'll feel it, and when you do, it stays with you. Some things never really leave, no matter how far you go. My name's Doyle Harper, and I'm from Brackettville, Texas. It's one of those small towns where everybody knows everybody and nothing much changes. It sits out in the middle of the brush country, not far from the old Fort Clark, where folks used to come through on their way to somewhere else. Not much goes on these days, except the wind blowing through the mesquite trees and the occasional truck rumbles down the highway. It was a quiet place, and it was always a place that felt like it'd been here forever, like it was meant to be forgotten. Sometimes when the evening came on, you could feel the stillness in the air, like time was holding its breath. And it was on one of those evenings that I learned something about the past that still lingers in my bones. This was back when I was younger, working nights over at the gas station by the highway. We had a little diner there too, and I'd sit on the back porch when things slowed down, just watching the sun go down, letting the peace of the place settle in. There's something about the quiet out here that gets into you. It makes you feel like the land's always been here and always will be. Maybe that's why folks don't talk too much about what happens on the outskirts near the old cemetery. You know, the one with the iron gate that always seems to be half open? It's like it's waiting for someone to come in but never asking too much of them. I drive past that cemetery every day, and sometimes, if the night was right, I'd pull off just to stretch my legs, feel the wind in the quiet. The old headstones are worn with age, names fading like the years themselves. But there's something about it, something about that place that always unsettled me a little. You ever get the feeling that something's just a little bit wrong, even though everything looks fine? That's how the cemetery felt. Like someone was watching, but you couldn't tell who or from where. I'd stand there in the stillness, just waiting for that feeling to pass. But it never did. One evening, it was late around midnight, I'd guess I was taking a slow drive out that way. The air had that crispness to it, and the headlights of my truck cut through the dark like an old lantern. The road's not much more than a stretch of dirt with a few potholes, but it's familiar, like a thread that keeps pulling you back. I'd been down that road 100 times, but that night something felt different. I wasn't planning on stopping, but something caught my eye, something that shouldn't have been there. Right off the side of the road, a mausoleum I hadn't noticed before stood there tall, but not grand. Just ... old. There's no telling how many graves are out there. But this one stood out like it didn't belong. It wasn't on the map. No name etched on the stone, no marker, nothing to say who it belonged to. Just stone and the faintest smell of flowers in the air, like the wind had carried them from somewhere far off. I felt a little uneasy, like something was waiting inside, though there wasn't a soul around. I didn't think much of it at first, figured it was just another forgotten part of the town's history. Something lost to time, but every time I drove by after that, I felt it. That feeling of being watched. At first, it was just a flicker in my mind, but it kept happening every time I went past. It was like the air got heavier. I couldn't shake the sense that something was right there, right behind me, though I never saw anyone. I tried to tell myself it was just the wind, or maybe my tired eyes playing tricks. But deep down, I knew something was off. It was a week later when I decided to pull off again and walk over to that mausoleum, get a closer look. There was a full moon that night, shining light across the empty land. My boots crunched against the dirt as I approached, the faint sound of the wind whispering through the mesquite trees. The closer I got, the more the feeling wrapped around me. Like something had been waiting there a long time, just for me. I tried to peer inside through the iron bars of the door, but all I could see was darkness. I wasn't sure what I expected to find. Maybe nothing at all. But when my hand brushed against the cool stone, I felt it. A pulse, almost like the place was alive, like it was breathing with the land. I pulled my hand away quick, but that wasn't the strangest part. It was the feeling in my chest, that cold dread that had settled in deep. I've been to my fair share of graveyards, stood beside the dead 1,000 times, but nothing ever felt like that. Like the earth was holding on to something it wasn't supposed to. That night, I didn't sleep much. The radio in my truck was all static, the kind of static that just adds to the quiet. But something about it felt ... different, like it was trying to tell me something I couldn't understand. The next morning, I went by the diner, grabbed a coffee, and asked old Bill, who kept the records of the cemetery. He gave me a long look like I had asked something I wasn't supposed to, and finally said there wasn't much to be found about the place. Not anymore. Some things, he said, just get forgotten. I couldn't let it go. I went back a few more times, always feeling that same weight in my chest, always wondering what had happened to that place, to that mausoleum. I looked through town records, old papers, tried asking around, but all I ever got was silence. There were no names, no families, no story to tell. It was as if it had never been there at all. But I knew what I felt. I haven't been back to that cemetery since. It's been years now, and I don't know if anyone else ever noticed that mausoleum. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't, but I know what I felt, and I know the quiet stillness of that place. Some nights when I drive by, I can still see that mausoleum in the corner of my eye, just sitting there, waiting. And I don't know if it's the land or the souls, but sometimes Sometimes I feel like something's still watching. Something that shouldn't be. Something forgotten. And maybe that's the hardest part, that something doesn't always rest. It just waits. Some souls refuse to sleep. My name is Clyde Turner, and I'm from Luling, Texas. A little town just off the highway where the train tracks cut through like veins on a worn-out map. You might have heard of it once or twice. But not too many folks know much about the place, just a small town where the days stretch out long and quiet. Folks here, we're used to the heat, the dust, and the slow rhythm of things. That's how it was when I was younger, too. The world moved at its own pace, like an old truck with a stubborn engine that just wouldn't turn over unless you gave it time. I've lived in Luling my whole life, and I reckon I've seen it change more than I'd care to talk about. But there's one thing I've never been able to shake, and that's the memory of that night out by the old church. It was a summer night, just like any other, but different somehow. I'll never forget it, no matter how hard I try. I was sitting out on the porch that night, kind of evening where the air smells thick like rain's coming, but it never does. The wind kept rustling through the mesquite trees across the way, and the hum of the porch light was almost enough to make you think you'd drift off to sleep right there in the rocker. My old dog Jake was lying in the dirt by the steps, just a huff of dust rising every time he moved. The cicadas were singing like they always did in the heat. You could almost hear the buzz of the night itself as the world settled in. A soft breeze pulled through the cracks of the house, and the sound of it made everything feel still. I had just finished a cup of coffee, had the thermos sitting there beside me, cold now, the steam long gone. I leaned back and closed my eyes for a moment, listening to the quiet, and then I heard it. At first, I thought it was just the wind, or maybe a stray dog howling off in the distance, but it didn't take long before I realized it was something else. It was faint, real faint, but I could hear it, a voice, or maybe a hum like a low choir singing, just on the edge of hearing. I told myself it was nothing, maybe the wind playing tricks, or the way the trees make sounds when the air's heavy. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. It wasn't like anything I'd ever heard. It wasn't the radio or some neighbor messing around. It felt wrong. It felt like it was there, but it wasn't. Like something old and waiting. I stood up, Jake lifting his head as if he heard it too, and I walked to the edge of the porch. I could feel the dry dirt crunching beneath my boots, the way it always does in the summer. The sound of the singing was still there, low but clear, and it seemed to be coming from the direction of the old church down by the cemetery. Now, I've lived here my whole life, and I've passed that church hundreds of times. Ain't much to look at now, just some old stone and worn-out wood, but I've always known it to be quiet. Folks don't go there much anymore, and when they do, it's only to visit the graves of people long gone. But that night, it was different. The air around the church felt heavy, like it was holding something in. I stood there for a minute, just listening. It seemed like the voices were getting louder, but still, I couldn't see anyone. I thought about walking down there, but something held me back. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was more like a quiet knowing that I wasn't supposed to go. The singing kept going, and I could feel it in my chest, like a distant drum beat. It wasn't right, not at all, and yet it felt so familiar, like something I should have known. The wind shifted, and the song faded a bit, but then it came back stronger this time, clearer. It was almost like it was calling to me, and I could hear the voices so well now that it felt like they were right behind me. I didn't dare turn around. The next morning, I went down to the church. It was quieter than I'd ever remembered, the kind of quiet that makes you uncomfortable. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of old wood filled the place. There wasn't a soul around, just the creak of the old doors as I stepped inside. I walked around half expecting to see something, but all I saw were the same old pews and worn floors, nothing out of place. But there was a book on the pulpit, an old hymnal that had been left open. I flipped through it, and that's when I saw it. A page torn almost clean off, but there was enough left to read. It had the names of a choir, one that had sung there many years ago, back when the church was still used every Sunday. But there was something strange about those names. They were all crossed out, one after another, like someone was trying to erase them. And the last name? It was mine. Clyde Turner. I don't know how it got there, or why it was written, but I knew then that it wasn't just a coincidence. It wasn't a mistake. I walked out of the church feeling heavier than I'd ever felt in my life. And the singing, the choir, was still there, echoing through the back of my mind. It didn't fade. It didn't stop. Sometimes, I still hear it, in the quiet moments when I'm alone, like a memory rising up from the dust. And when I pass that old church, I swear I see a light on in one of the windows, flickering just enough to make you wonder. I don't go back there anymore, but every now and then, if the wind is right, I hear the faintest hum of those voices. They're still singing, waiting for someone to hear them. My name is Rufus Harper, and I'm from a little place called St. Joe, Texas. It's out there, in the rolling hills. A place so quiet you could hear a pin drop on the dusty main street, if there were anyone around to drop one. That's the kind of town it is, always still, like the world's holding its breath. I don't know if you'd call it a town, really. More like a handful of folks who know each other too well. It's one of those spots where the past never quite lets go. Maybe that's what gets to me the most now. It wasn't always like that, though. Back then, things were simple. Peaceful, even. I had a good life, and I never thought I'd be telling this story. Not like this, anyway. It was the summer of '67 when it all started. I remember it like it was yesterday, even though it feels like another lifetime. That evening, the wind was light, barely a breath, but it still carried that smell of rain in the air. The kind that tells you a storm's on the way even if the sky's clear. The cicadas were singing their endless song, and I was out on the porch, nursing a cup of coffee from the old thermos my dad had given me. It was the kind of coffee that could keep you awake for days, but I liked it that way. In the quiet of the evening, you didn't need much to pass the time. My boots were by the door, still dusty from the day, and the porch light buzzed softly above me, flickering every now and then. I remember thinking how peaceful it all was, how grounded. But that night something felt wrong. You ever get that feeling someone's there even when you can't see them? That's how it felt sitting there on the porch. Like something was just beyond my sight, but it wasn't ready to show itself yet. I didn't know what it was, but I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, gnawing away at me. I tried to ignore it, told myself it was just the wind, just the old house settling. But deep down I knew it wasn't. The air was still and heavy, like the whole world was waiting for something. It wasn't until later that I realized the first time I felt that way was when I saw it. Saw him. I don't remember his name. He wasn't someone I'd ever met, not before that night. He came to town on a Tuesday, walked in off the highway, looking lost. The man had the look of someone who'd been through more than their share of bad luck, but he didn't say much. Just asked where he could find a place to sleep. He'd been driving all day, he said. The only place open was the old Riverside Motel on the outskirts of town. There was only one light on when I drove by. The rest of the rooms were empty, and even the sign looked like it might fall over at any minute. The next evening, after I finished up at the farm, I drove past the motel again. The light in that room was still on, but this time it was brighter than before. It's a strange thing, a light in the middle of nowhere, but there it was, glowing against the night. It struck me as odd, but I thought maybe I'd just seen it wrong the first time. Or maybe it was just the old wiring. That's what I told myself. But the next night, the light was on again, and it was even brighter. I told myself I was imagining things. That the old building had a way of playing tricks on you, especially when the weather turned. But by the third night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't the only one looking at that light. I don't know how long I stood there that evening, staring at that room. But eventually I turned the truck around and pulled into the parking lot. I wasn't sure what I was doing there, not really, but it felt like I had to be. When I stepped out of the truck, I remembered the silence. Nothing but the sound of my boots on the gravel, the hum of that old porch light. I walked up to the room and knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Nothing. I figured he'd gone off somewhere or fallen asleep. I wasn't sure, but it didn't sit right with me. So, I tried the door. It opened. I don't know why I went inside. I was never the kind of man to stick my nose where it didn't belong. But that night, I didn't know what else to do. The room smelled like dust and stale air. The kind of smell you get when a place hasn't been used in years. The bed was made just like you'd expect. But that light, it was so bright, almost blinding. It was coming from the small window by the bed. I walked over to it and looked out, but I couldn't see anything. Just the usual dust, the old creek bed running through the valley, and the distant hills that seemed to stretch on forever. It wasn't the view that had my attention, though. It was the silence. The way the night felt like it was closing in on me, pressing in from all sides. Then I noticed the papers on the bed. A stack of them, scattered across the sheets. Old, yellowed pages with writing on them. I can still see them now, the way the light caught the ink like it was fresh, like the man had just written them. There was a poem there. I didn't read it all. I didn't need to. It was about loss, about something dark that had come before. It felt familiar, like something I'd heard once but couldn't place. As I looked at those papers, I felt a coldness crawl over me. The kind of cold you feel when you realize you're not alone, even though no one's there. The kind of cold that makes you want to run. But I didn't run. Instead, I left. I don't know why. Maybe because it felt like I wasn't meant to understand what I was seeing. Maybe because I knew deep down that there was something I couldn't fix. The next morning, the man was gone. I don't know where he went, or if he ever came back. But the light stayed on every night, and I still see it when I drive by. That one room, that one light, shining out against the darkness. There's a lot of things I could tell you about that time, about the way the town changed after that night, but I won't. It's not my place. Sometimes, though, when I drive past that old motel, I still see the light on in that one room. The rest is gone, but that one light stays. I don't think it's ever going to go out, and I don't think I'll ever understand why it won't. It's like that poem, I guess. Some words were never meant to be forgotten. Some lights were never meant to fade. My name is Earl Duncan, and I'm from St. Joe, Texas. Now, St. Joe ain't much to speak of, just a few streets, an old gas station, and a handful of houses tucked in between the hills and the flatland. But it's home, and I reckon that means something, even if the years have gone by too fast. I left that town for a spell, worked in the oil fields up north, but I always came back. It's a quiet to it, the kind that lets a man think, or forget, depending on what he's after. I remember the summers best. The heat so thick, you could taste it, and the long nights that seemed to stretch on forever. You could hear the crickets and the cicadas hum, and sometimes, if you listened real close, the wind would carry the scent of rain just before it hit. It always felt like there was something about to change, like the air itself was waiting. I remember an old porch light I'd sit under some nights. It'd buzz steady, real faint, and sometimes it felt like the whole world was asleep, except for me, sitting there with a thermos of coffee, just watching the dust settle on the driveway. I've seen a lot of folks pass through St. Joe over the years, but there was one time I'll never forget, not in all my days. It was back in '82, I think. Can't say for sure, but it was one of those summers. I'd been out on the ranch fixing a broken fence when I saw him, that old man. He wasn't from around here, not like the regulars, and he had this look about him, the kind that makes you take a second glance. He was walking up the road, slow-like, with a brown hat pulled down over his face. I figured he was just passing through, maybe looking for a place to rest, but when he came up to the porch, he stopped. Didn't say nothin', just stood there. I remember thinking it was strange, how still he was. I offered him some coffee, but he didn't answer. Not right away. Finally, he pulled up a chair, sat down, and looked out over the fields. That's when I noticed the silence. You know how it is in the country, even the wind seems to hum when it's just right. But that day, the world was quiet. Too quiet. The radio crackled in the background, nothing but static, and I remember feeling like the air was holding its breath. "You from St. Joe?" I asked, trying to break the quiet. He didn't look at me, just nodded. "Just passing through then?" Another nod. I felt a kind of weight in his silence, like something was waiting. It wasn't until after he left that I noticed the old gravestones down by the creek had shifted. Now, I'm no fool. I know land shifts. Stones move in the dirt over time, but there was something odd about how they were leaning. It's just a little bit closer to the path than they'd been before. Like they were trying to get nearer to the road, to the house, to me. I told myself I was just imagining it. Maybe the heat was getting to me. But the next week I saw it again. The stones were closer still, leaning at strange angles, as if they were moving of their own accord. You'd have thought they were just rocks, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Now, folks in town don't talk much about the cemetery. It's on the edge of town, near the creek where the trees crowd together and the air always smells damp. The place had been there as long as anyone could remember, but no one ever spent much time out there. I'd been by it plenty of times, just to pay respects to my folks and the others. But after that day, I started seeing things I hadn't noticed before. One evening, I went out there to check on the stones, see if they'd moved again. Sure enough, they had. They were standing closer to each other, like they were trying to form some kind of circle. I'd been living in that town for years, but the cemetery, it wasn't the same anymore. It felt different, colder somehow, and the trees there seemed taller, their branches reaching out like hands. I knew I had to find out what was going on. So I started asking around, talking to the older folks who'd lived here longer than me. Most of them just gave me strange looks, like they were hearing me wrong. But one old woman, Mrs. Colson, she told me something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. She said, "The land doesn't forget, Earl. Some places, they hold on to things, hold on to people." I didn't know what she meant at first, but then she told me the story of the McAllister family. They were buried out there, she said, a long time ago. They'd come from the east, looking for a fresh start, but something had happened to them, something bad. No one knew for sure, but some folks said they never left the land, that their spirits or something else had stayed, watching, waiting. And now, I reckon I believe it. See, after I started noticing the stones shifting, I began to feel like I wasn't alone out there. I'd go to visit just to keep watch, but the air would feel heavy, like someone was standing behind me, even when I couldn't see him. Sometimes, I'd hear footsteps in the leaves, but when I'd turn around, there wouldn't be anyone there. It wasn't until the last time I went that I really understood. The stones were almost touching now, all lined up like a row of old friends. The path I'd walked so many times was gone, swallowed up by the creeping earth. The moss-covered stones looking like they were going to fall over, and then I saw it. Shadow, tall and thin, moving between the trees. I didn't know what to think, but I knew I had to leave. And I did, as fast as my legs could carry me. But even now, every time I pass that cemetery, I see the stones shifting, moving just a little closer. And I can't help but wonder if they're waiting for me, or if they've been waiting all along. Maybe some things aren't meant to be left behind. Maybe some places hold on to you, whether you want them to or not. I'll still sit out on my porch some nights, with the wind blowing soft and the sound of cicadas in the air, and I'll think about that place, about the stones and the shadows and what's left of the McAllister family. And sometimes, when I'm alone, I feel the weight of it all, like the land's still holding on, still waiting for something, maybe waiting for me. I don't know. I don't think I'll ever know. I reckon it doesn't matter much, not anymore. My name is Earl Jones, and I'm from Andrews, Texas. It's a little town out west, not much to it. Dirt roads, dusty fields, an old grocery store on the corner. The kind of place where everyone knows your name, and if you're lucky, they remember your granddaddy too. I've lived here most of my life, and sometimes, when I'm sitting out on the porch in the evenings, I can still feel the weight of the past, like it's pressing in around me. The wind will shift, and I'll smell the dust in the air. And it takes me back to a time long ago, when things felt ... different. It was in the summer of 1963 when it happened, though I never really understood it. Maybe I still don't, even now. I was a young man just out of high school. Hadn't yet figured out what I was going to do with myself. A friend of mine, Jim Parsons, asked me to go out to his family's ranch one evening. It wasn't far, just a short drive down a dirt road, past the creek and those old mesquite trees, the ones that always seemed to hum when the wind blew through them. Jim's folks lived out there in a house that had seen better days. No running water, just a hand pump in the yard and a wood stove inside for cooking. But it was peaceful, and Jim was a good guy. We'd been friends since we were kids. Anyway, that night Jim asked me to stay a little longer. The sun had gone down, and the stars were starting to peek out over the wide, empty sky. It wasn't unusual for us to sit out on the porch after dark, listening to the crickets and the occasional howl of a coyote far off. The smell of coffee was still in the air. Jim's mom made a pot every night, even if it was late. The screen door creaked when I went back inside to get my jacket, but that's all. I remember thinking how quiet it was, almost too quiet, like the whole world was holding its breath. That's when I noticed something strange. Out past the fence, near the creek, there was a figure. I didn't know at first what it was, just a shadow, standing still in the tall grass. I thought it was probably someone coming to check the cattle, or maybe one of the neighbors, though it seemed odd that they'd be out there at this hour. I remember feeling the hair on the back of my neck stand up a little, but I didn't say anything to Jim. He was sitting there, his boots kicked up on the porch rail, looking out into the night, not paying attention. I stood up and squinted into the dark. The figure didn't move, not even a little. It was just standing there. I don't know why I felt the need to go check, but I did. I told Jim I'd be back in a minute, that I was going to see who it was. He barely nodded. Didn't seem concerned. I grabbed my jacket and walked out into the yard, the dust shifting beneath my boots. I was careful not to make any noise. The air had that cool, crisp feel to it, like it was just waiting for something. The closer I got to the creek, the more uneasy I felt. Like there was something wrong, something I couldn't put my finger on. When I finally reached the spot where I'd seen the figure, there was nothing. No person. Just the same empty, wide-open land, the rustle of grass in the wind, and that damn feeling of being watched. I stood there for a while, just looking at the place where it had been. Couldn't shake the feeling. I told myself it was nothing. The wind, maybe. Or my mind playing tricks. But I went back to the porch, and Jim was still sitting there, looking out into the dark. Didn't even ask where I'd gone. I thought maybe I'd imagined the whole thing, but later that night, when I went to bed in the little room by the back door, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the way the figure had been standing still, like it was waiting for something. Then, a couple of nights later, I saw it again. Same spot, same stillness. This time, I didn't go outside. Just sat there, staring out the window, trying to figure out what I was seeing. It wasn't a person. Not really. The way the figure stood, it looked like it was made of the night itself. It's like it wasn't really there, just a part of the darkness. And it didn't look like it was waiting for someone. It was waiting for something. It was then that I realized something was wrong. Something had been wrong all along. I don't know how to explain it, but I could feel it deep in my bones. The land, the air, it felt like it was holding a secret, one I wasn't supposed to know. Over the next few weeks, I saw that figure more and more. Every time it was there, it was just standing, waiting. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and look out the window, and there it would be, standing by the creek. I could never make out its face, but something about its stillness, its silence began to gnaw at me. I thought maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe it was just the isolation, the long nights with nothing but the stars and the wind to keep you company. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized the figure wasn't just standing out there. It was waiting for me. Years have gone by since then, and I still can't forget it. I don't know what that thing was, or why it kept appearing. I've driven down that same dirt road hundreds of times, and every time I feel a chill like I'm being watched. Sometimes when the wind blows just right, I can still smell the dust in the air, and it takes me right back to those nights. I haven't seen the figure in years, but there are nights when I swear it's still out there, waiting. And I wonder if it's still waiting for me to understand something I never quite could. Maybe some things aren't meant to be understood. Maybe the land keeps its secrets, and we're just supposed to leave them be. But I'll tell you this, when the wind starts to shift, and the air gets that funny smell, I can't help but wonder if it's still there, waiting for me, for someone else. Some things, they don't ever really go away. They just wait. My name is Tom Fletcher, and I'm from Sinton, Texas. Now, Sinton's a quiet place. Always has been. Not much happens here that anyone write home about. But there's one thing. Something that happened a long time ago that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. You see, we didn't have much when I was young, but we had a little place on the edge of town. A small house with a porch that faced the long, lonely stretch of Highway 77 There was a steady hum to the evenings there, that warm, steady Texas air mixing with the scent of mesquite and the hum of cicadas on the trees. It was peaceful most nights, quiet. But then, every now and then, there was a stillness. Something that would settle in deeper than usual. It wasn't the sort of silence that made you feel calm, but the kind that felt heavy, like something was watching. You ever get that feeling like someone's there even when you can't see them? That's how it felt that night. I remember it like it was just yesterday. I'd been out working late, fixing the old truck, the engine groaning as it struggled to turn over. I was tired, my boots dustied from walking back and forth to the barn. And the radio in my truck, the old AM station, was fading in and out, giving me nothing but static. By the time I finished up, the sun had long gone down and the moon was just beginning to rise, full and heavy in the sky. I don't know why, but I felt this tug to go for a walk. Out past the old gas station, where the flickering light always seemed to buzz, too loud. It was late, but the air still had that warm bite to it, like summer was holding on just a little longer. I started down the road, my boots kicking up a bit of dust. And the night was so quiet that you could almost hear the earth itself breathing. The kind of quiet where everything feels too still, like the world's holding its breath. I walked past the old motel on the outskirts, the one with the broken sign that flickers just enough to remind you it's there, but never enough to light the place up proper. That's when I noticed it. The door. The door on the far end of the lot, the one that hadn't opened in years, it was cracked open, just a little, like someone was standing on the other side, watching. Now, I'd been by there 100 times before, but I'd never seen that door move. Never. I should have turned around. I should have gone home. Back to the porch, where the light hummed like it always did and everything felt normal. But I didn't. I stepped closer. The smell of rain hung in the air, the kind of rain that never quite falls, just sits there waiting. As I got near, I heard something faint, like a whisper. Not a voice, not really, but like words carried on the wind. It made my skin prickle, but I still couldn't bring myself to leave. I stood there for a minute, just staring at the door, and then, without meaning to, I reached out and pushed it open. It wasn't loud, just a soft creak, but that sound seemed to echo too long, like it shouldn't have been there at all. Inside, the room was dark, but I could just make out the outlines of old furniture, tables covered in dust, chairs scattered like they hadn't been used in years. And then on the far wall, there was a portrait. I don't know why I didn't leave right then, but something about it kept me there. The painting, it wasn't of anyone I recognized, but there was something about the eyes. Those eyes followed me. The air felt thicker as I stepped closer, the hairs on the back of my neck rising. The longer I stared at that painting, the more I felt it like something old was waking up. The temperature seemed to drop all at once, and I heard that whisper again, but this time, it wasn't the wind. It was a voice, soft and strained, like it had been trapped for a long, long time. I can't explain it, but when I heard those words, it felt like the room had closed in around me. I stepped back, ready to turn and run. But then I heard something else. Footsteps. Faint, slow, like someone was walking towards me. I don't know why I didn't just bolt right then and there, but something kept me rooted to the spot. And then, through the crack in the door, I saw him. A man, tall, wearing old-fashioned clothes, a suit, like something out of another time. His face was pale, almost sickly, and he didn't say a word. He just looked at me, and that was when I knew. It wasn't the way he looked, or the way he was dressed. It was the feeling. That feeling that something was watching, waiting, the kind of thing you can't see, but you can feel deep down in your bones. I turned and left, fast, and didn't look back until I was clear of the motel lot. When I finally made it back to the house, the porch light was still buzzing, just like it always did. And the radio in my truck had gone quiet. I told myself it was just the wind. I told myself it was nothing. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Sometimes, when I drive past that old motel, I still see the light flickering in that one room. The rest of the place is gone, but that one light stays on, even though I know no one's been there for years. Every time I see it, I can't help but wonder if that man's still standing in the doorway, waiting. But I don't go back. I won't. And every time I feel that same stillness settle in the air, that same heavy quiet, I know that whatever it was, it's still out there, just waiting. My name is Earl Whitley, and I'm from a little place called Nocana, Texas. It's not much, just a handful of folks, and the kind of dry, still air that makes everything seem like it's sitting in a moment that never moves. The kind of place where people don't say much, but they notice everything. There's something about that quiet. The way the wind stirs the dust and the cicadas hum their songs, like the land itself is breathing slow. I guess that's why I never thought much of it when things started to feel strange. It all began when my brother Bobby, bless his heart, decided he wanted to be an artist. Didn't make much sense to us at first, not with the farm and all, but Bobby was determined. He went off to college, studied art in places like Austin, where the buildings were tall and the air was thick with something I couldn't quite name. He called me once from there, told me he'd found something special, a statue. Now, it wasn't the kind of thing we'd have around here, no sir. Bobby said it was an angel, but not the kind you find in any church or cemetery. This one was different. He said it looked like it was carved out of stone, but it felt real, like it might move if you turned your back on it. Said it was in the Prazeres Cemetery in Lisbon, Portugal, a place he'd gone while traveling through Europe, he described. It to me in that slow way he had, like he was still standing there in front of it. Said it had eyes that followed you, but not in a way that made you feel welcome, more like it was waiting for something. He was supposed to take a picture of it, something to show in his next gallery showing. But Bobby told me, Earl, when I went to snap the photo, it was like I couldn't. Like the camera wouldn't work right. I didn't quite understand, but I nodded anyway. Bobby had always been a little different anyway. It wasn't long after that when he sent me a letter. Told me he was coming back, but that something had happened. Said the statue, or what it represented, had been calling to him, and that he needed to go back to where it was, to figure out what it all meant. He said he couldn't shake the feeling that it was somehow tied to our family. I thought about it then, but only for a moment. You get a letter from your brother, and you don't question it too hard. You just hold on to it. Like the old times when a letter was all you got. Bobby came back to Nocona a month later, and I could see something was off with him. Didn't talk much. And when he did, his words were slow, like he was waiting for something to catch up to him. He took me out to that old shack he called his studio, and showed me some pictures, but something didn't sit right. The pictures were of that statue, the one in Lisbon, but in each one it looked different. In one, it seemed to have a shadow behind it, moving even though the rest of the scene was still. In another, the face of the angel wasn't just staring, there was something else in its eyes, something I couldn't place. Bobby said he'd been trying to figure out what was happening. He had this look on his face like he wasn't quite sure if he was still here, if that statue had taken something from him. I didn't know what to make of it. Then one evening after dinner, I saw it for myself. I was out on the porch watching the sun fall behind the trees when I caught something moving in the corner of my eye. I turned, but it was gone. It's just a shadow on the ground, stretching long across the dirt. It wasn't like the shadows from the trees this one felt. Wrong. I didn't think much of it at first, just chalked it up to a trick of the light. But the next few days, it kept happening. I'd see that same shadow out of the corner of my eye, moving when nothing else did. It followed me from room to room, like it was waiting for something. Bobby would sit out there with me, but he wouldn't say much. One night he finally did. Said, Earl, do you ever feel like something's just watching you? Like it's always been there? Just out of sight? I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. But deep down, I knew what he was talking about. There was something off. Something that wasn't quite right. The next day, Bobby came to me with a handful of papers, old news clippings and photographs from the cemetery. I didn't understand at first, but as he laid them out on the table, I started to get a feeling, a sick one in my stomach. There was an old story from back in the early 1900s about a man named Eduardo Ribeiro, a sculptor who'd made that statue. He said he'd fallen in love with a woman from the town, but she betrayed him, leaving him brokenhearted. I said, he carved the statue to look like her, to keep her close, even after she was gone. But the story went on. People whispered that Eduardo hadn't just carved her likeness, he'd bound her soul to the stone. Bobby said he thought the angel wasn't just an angel, Thought it was her. The woman's spirit had been trapped inside that statue, waiting, watching. For what I didn't know, but Bobby did. Said he'd felt it, like it was calling to him, asking him to come back, to figure out the unfinished business. I didn't understand it all. It wasn't until a week later that I realized what was going on. Bobby had disappeared. Not a word, not a trace, just gone. And that same shadow I'd been seeing, it was still there, hanging around the porch, waiting. I never told anyone about the shadow or the way the air would feel thick and wrong in certain places. You get to an age where you start to learn what to ignore, but I still feel it even now. When the wind dies down, when the light outside gets quiet, I swear I see something. And every now and then I wonder, was Bobby really looking for the truth? Or was he just another one of those souls who got caught up in that statue, who never quite found his way out? Sometimes when I drive past that old cemetery, I swear I can see a shadow moving across the stones, slow and steady, like it's watching. And I don't know if it's Bobby or something else, but I don't stop to find out. Some things don't need to be understood. They just need to be left alone. My name is Samuel T. Sam Avery, and I'm from a little place called Anahuac, Texas. You've probably never heard of it, most folks haven't, but it's tucked away on the banks of the Trinity River. Just a little ways east of Houston, where the woods seem to close in on you and the air smells of damp earth and thick moss. Now, you won't find much there these days, but if you grew up in those parts, you learned early that everything has a way of holding on to its secrets, especially the land. I've been around long enough to see the years stack up, but one memory stays with me more than the others. A memory of something strange that happened on one of those quiet summer nights. When the cicadas hum and the porch light buzzes like an old bee trying to get out. It all started with an old man who lived on the outskirts of town, Joe Banks. Folks called him... Joe wasn't his real name, I don't think, but that's what everyone called him. He had a house right at the edge of the woods near a piece of land nobody dared to touch. I don't reckon you'd find many folks who'd speak ill of Joe, but there was something about him that gave people pause. Something in his eyes, the way his hands shook when he'd take his coffee, or the way he'd stare off across the river as though he could see something the rest of us couldn't. The rumors about him had been around for as long as I could remember. Some said Joe had made a deal with the devil, and that was why he lived so far off. Why he never seemed to age right, or why he could always find something in the woods, like the land itself had whispered the answer to him. I've seen folks shake their heads, muttering that old Joe might have known too much, that maybe he'd bargained with something dark in the past. I didn't put much stock in it. Folks around here will say anything to pass the time. But there was one thing that stuck with me, a story about his grave. It wasn't just that he was buried at the little cemetery near the river. No. What was odd was that every now and then, on a moonless night, you could see lights flickering above his grave, real strange-like, glowing faint in the dark. I never saw it myself, but I can't tell you how many folks swore up and down they had. The first time I heard the story, it was from my cousin, who'd gone down to the cemetery with his buddies. They'd been drinking, playing their music, and were fooling around when they saw a blue light, not big, just hovering, flickering right where Joe Banks was buried. My cousin said he didn't stick around to see what it did next. He didn't need to. I didn't think much about it then. You know how it is. People get scared of things they don't understand. But then one summer evening, the strangest thing happened. I'd come into town for a few days, and old Danny Ray, a history buff who'd spent his life studying every inch of Anahuac, asked me to meet him at the cemetery. Danny had a mind for facts, for stories that had roots deep in the past, and this time, he had something new to show me. I don't know why I agreed. Maybe it was the promise of good coffee or the need for a break from the house. But I met him there, just before sunset, and we stood by the old iron fence. The river running slow behind us, the mosquitoes thick in the air. "Sam," Danny said in that quiet way of his, "I've been going through the old records, found something strange about Joe Banks." I remember the look on his face. How it wasn't the normal, excited gleam he had when he found something new. This was different. He pulled out a worn notebook, pages yellowed with age, and flipped it open. He pointed to a name, Joe Banks, written in neat, formal script hand, then to a strange symbol beside it. The symbol didn't make any sense to me. I don't know if it was a language or just someone's scribble, but Danny seemed sure. Joe made a deal, Sam. Not just stories, not just whispers. I found proof letters, receipts, even a few old books. He told me about the strange lights and how they matched the same description from old texts he'd found in an archive up in Houston. Texts that spoke of deals, sacrifices, and lights that marked the boundary between what we see and what we don't. I didn't like it, not one bit. Danny's excitement faded when he saw the look on my face. We stood there for a while, the wind picking up in the trees, the faint rustle of something moving in the grass. After a while, he asked, "You ever seen the lights, Sam?" I told him I hadn't, but I wasn't so sure anymore. Something about the way he asked, it made me uneasy, like he already knew the answer. That night, after Danny and I left the cemetery, I couldn't sleep. It was too quiet. Still, I kept hearing things in the dark. I thought it was just my mind playing tricks, but when I woke up, the whole world felt different, heavier. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was more than the old man's grave, more than the rumors. It was the land, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I started walking the woods more, not because I wanted to, but because I felt like I had to. I don't know why I couldn't stop. I'd see shadows move out of the corner of my eye, hear something that sounded like a voice in the wind, and every time, my heart would skip a beat. Like I'd almost caught something, but it was just out of reach. I kept thinking about that light, the blue glow, the way it flickered like it was calling to me. And the more I thought about it, the more I wondered if Joe's deal was still in effect, if whatever he'd done wasn't finished. A part of me wanted to go down to that grave and see for myself. Maybe that's the part of me that wanted answers, that wanted to know what Danny had uncovered, what the land was hiding. But I never went back, not after that night. The next time I passed by the cemetery, I swear I saw a light, just a flicker, off to the side, near Joe Banks' grave. I haven't been back since, but sometimes when I drive past that old place, I see it again, just a little glow in the dark, flickering. I don't know what it is, or what it means. Maybe it's nothing. But if you ever find yourself out by the river at night, and you see that blue light flickering in the distance, just know that it's not just the dark playing tricks on you. Something's waiting there. Something that's been waiting a long time. I don't reckon I'll ever understand it. I don't think I want to. My name is Billy Ray Hawkins, and I'm from Honey Grove, Texas, a little town up by the Red River. If you ever pass through, you'd probably blink and miss it, but it's home. A place where the roads are long, and the wind always carries a little dust with it, no matter what time of year. I've spent most of my days here helping folks with anything, from fence posts to farmhands, but there's a story I've never been able to let go of. One I reckon I should have forgotten by now. It happened on a slow summer evening, the kind where the sun hangs low in the sky, and the air is still heavy with heat, yet somehow just barely cool enough to sit out on the porch after dark. I remember it like it was yesterday, though it's been years now. It was one of those nights where the air felt a little thicker than usual. It's a kind where you can almost hear the earth breathing. The cicadas were out in full force, a constant hum, and the light from the old porch lamp flickered just a little, casting long shadows across the yard. I was sitting in that old rocking chair of mine, the one that squeaks when you lean back too far, and I could smell the rain coming. The kind of smell that makes you feel like you should hold your breath. It's like the earth itself's about to open up and pour out something it's been holding on to for a long time. I'd been working on a couple of things around the house, mostly fixing up the barn and cleaning out the truck, but I was too tired for that now. The only thing I had the energy for was to sit and sip my coffee from a thermos I'd left out there by the door, still warm from the morning. It was the quiet that night that got to me first. It was too quiet, if you ask me. Now, I'm no stranger to quiet, especially out here in the country, but this was different. There weren't any dogs barking off in the distance, and the usual low hum of traffic from the highway felt like it was a world away. Even the air, which usually has a way of talking, was still. Just when I started to notice it, I thought I heard something, just a whisper in the wind, like it was calling my name, soft and almost familiar, but distant. It made me sit up a little straighter. I shook my head, thinking it was nothing more than the wind playing tricks. But then I saw a flash of light over by the old creek bed. At first I thought it might be a car coming down the road. But the headlights didn't move the way they should have. No headlights swinging from side to side like they usually do when a truck's coming down the lane. This light, it just stayed in one spot. I stood up from the chair, my boots scraping the porch as I shuffled over toward the steps. My heart was beating a little faster now, but I figured I'd just go take a look, shake it off. Couldn't let myself get spooked this time of night. I walked down to the yard, feeling the dry dust under my boots, and looked toward the creek, but the light was gone. I was about to turn around when I saw something else movement just on the edge of the woods, but when I tried to focus on it, I couldn't make it out. Nothing there. Not a single thing. I don't know what made me go down that old dirt road that night. It wasn't like me, but something about the stillness, about that feeling in the air, made me get in my truck and head out. The engine sputtered to life with a groan, the old truck doing what it always does before it finally catches. I turned the wheel and drove down the narrow, empty road, the headlights cutting through the darkness ahead. There wasn't much out that way except for old fields and empty ranch houses. I don't know how far I drove, but it felt like hours. Finally, I came up on the old cemetery. There was a tall, wrought-iron fence around it. Its gates rusted from years of neglect, and it had been abandoned for as long as I could remember. You couldn't even see the tombstones from the road unless you pulled up right next to the gate. I parked my truck on the shoulder and sat for a while, just watching. The silence was heavy, like it was waiting for something to happen. Maybe it was the way the wind rustled through the branches of the old trees, or the way the moon hung low in the sky, but there was something about that cemetery that felt wrong. I wasn't sure why I went inside. It was late, and I didn't know if I'd be trespassing. But I got out of the truck and walked through the gate, the metal creaking and groaning under my hand as I pushed it open. The ground was soft underfoot, and I kept expecting to hear the crunch of old leaves or sticks. But it was as if the place absorbed all sound. The tombstones were old, some of them, leaning or broken, some so weathered that you couldn't make out any names anymore. I was walking past one of the oldest ones when I felt the hairs on the back of my neck standing up, an unshakable feeling that someone or something was watching me. I turned to my right, and that's when I saw it. One of the tombs, the one closest to the fence, was different. It looked almost too new. The stone was clean, and the engraving was sharp clear. There was a plaque with a name I didn't recognize. As I looked closer, I noticed something strange. There were no flowers, no wreaths, no sign that anyone had ever visited. Just that cold, empty tomb. Something inside me urged me to take a picture, so I pulled out my camera. I don't know why I felt the need to do it, but I snapped a shot at the grave. Just one, right there under the flickering moonlight. And then I heard a sound, something soft at first, just the creak of the old stone door on the tomb. I looked up from the camera, and for a second, I swear I saw something move inside. I dropped the camera, and it fell into the dirt with a thud. My heart started pounding, and I took a step back, thinking it was my mind playing tricks on me. I waited for a long moment before walking back toward the truck. But as I looked over my shoulder, I saw something that made me freeze. The tomb, the one with the clean plaque, was empty. The stone door was wide open, and there was no body inside. I've never been able to explain it, and I don't reckon I ever will. But that night, something in that cemetery changed. Something I can't quite put into words. Sometimes, when I pass by that old place on my way into town, I'll look over, and for just a moment, I swear I see that tomb again still standing, but the door always open. The grave that shouldn't have been disturbed, and yet it always is. And when I remember that, it's like something shifts in the air, like the earth's holding its breath again, waiting for something that's never quite arrived. Sometimes, when the wind picks up, I still hear the creak of that door. And I wonder, deep down, if I was the one meant to see it all along. My name's Willard Bill Turner, and I'm from Killeen, Texas. It's just up the road from Fort Hood. Been around here all my life, save for a couple of years when I was a young man, but I always came back. You know how it is when you're born into a place. It kind of stays with you, even when you wander. I was always a quiet sort, Not much for the big city life. Not much for anything too flashy. I'd rather spend an evening sitting on the porch, coffee in hand, just listening to the world go by. That's how I remember it most, anyway. The world going by real slow, like an old truck engine trying to start, sputtering but always managing to turn over in the end. That was my life, steady, unassuming, and at least in my mind, peaceful. But there was this one night, one strange night, I can't quite shake. I was driving home from Austin, the kind of trip where you're tired. The road seems longer than usual, and everything's a little quieter than it should be. It was well past midnight when I turned onto that old highway near the outskirts of town, the one that cuts through the fields and past the dead-end street where the old graveyard's at. Don't know why, but I've always taken that road home. It's got that quiet feel to it, you know? No streetlights, just the pale glow from the moon catching on the dust that swirls in the wind. I pulled the truck off the road at that spot, just out of habit, and killed the engine. That's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but it wasn't. It was a soft hum, almost like a far-off melody. At first, it didn't make much sense, like something out of an old dream, but it grew clearer. A violin, high and sweet, with the brush of a cello in the background. I didn't know what to think of it, but I knew one thing for sure: it wasn't the wind. It came from the direction of the graveyard, right where the old tombstones stand like sentinels in the dark. I wasn't a superstitious man, never have been, but there was something about that sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I figured it was some kids messing around though, so I grabbed my thermos of coffee and headed that way, thinking I'd just tell them to cut it out. But when I got closer, I realized there was nobody there. Not a soul. The tombstones stood just as they always did, weathered and quiet. The air smelled like rain was coming, but the sky was clear. There was no one playing that music, and yet there it was right in front of me, like it was hanging in the air itself. I walked toward the center of the graveyard, where the old stone chapel's at, and the sound only grew. It was beautiful, in a way that felt heavy, like it had been waiting for something. A few times, I thought I saw a shadow move between the graves, but it was hard to tell. Could have been the wind or just the play of the light, but there was a sense of someone being there. I stood there for what felt like an hour, listening, trying to understand. I figured it was just some old tape or recording from the chapel. Maybe someone had left it on, though that didn't make much sense. That chapel's been abandoned for years, ever since the last preacher moved out. I'm not one to believe in ghosts, but I tell you, something was wrong about that night. As I turned to leave, the music stopped, just like that. And when I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me. It's like it was waiting for me to hear it. But now, I wasn't meant to. I haven't been able to explain it, but sometimes when I drive by that old chapel, I swear I hear the faintest bit of that melody. Barely there, just a few notes, lost in the wind. I can't say I believe in spirits, but every time I think about it, there's something about that music, ... Like a man who had a song, but never got to finish it. Maybe he's still waiting to play it for someone. Maybe that unfinished symphony is out there, waiting to be heard. There's one thing for sure, though. I'll never stop driving that way. Maybe it's a foolish thing, but sometimes late at night, I find myself wondering if the next time I pull over, I might hear the rest of it. My name's Earl Red Cooper, and I'm from a little place called Wharton, Texas. Now, Wharton's one of those towns folks don't tend to think much about, just a small spot on the map. Right off Highway 59, a place where the wind howls like it's been mad for years. And the only lights you see at night are the flickering ones on the old gas station sign, and the ones. Keep on to make sure nothing sneaks up on you. Ain't a whole lot of folks around, except for a few scattered families. It's the ones who stayed put and built their lives there. When I was younger, I used to spend a lot of time working around town hauling hay. Fixing up trucks, helping out at the small store by the tracks. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept food on the table and kept the nights from getting too lonely. Now, I've lived through my share of strange things that made me scratch my head and tell myself it was just my mind playing tricks, but there's one thing that happened. Something I've never been able to shake, and it happened out by the old cemetery. Now, I'm not one to get too worked up about things that ain't there, but I reckon you'd be a fool to ignore what I saw that night. You ever been to that cemetery on the far edge of town, right where the road turns dusty and dark? Some folks say it's haunted, but folks always say things like that when they don't understand something. It was an old cemetery, full of broken stones and names that had faded away, buried in the dirt. I'd passed by it hundreds of times on my way out of town. Didn't think much of it. But then one evening I found myself down that way with the sun setting behind me. I don't know why, but I turned onto the dirt road and headed straight for it. You see, my wife Marlene, she'd passed on about a year before. Hard to forget, even harder to understand. She'd been sick, real sick, and when she went, it was like a part of me just got up and walked away with her. I remember standing there at her grave, in that quiet place, and feeling like maybe I could feel her presence, even if it was just the wind or a memory playing tricks. But what happened next? Well, it wasn't a trick. It was real. You see, in that cemetery, there's an old angel statue marble, pure white and tall, towering over everything else. It's got wings that stretch out like it's trying to protect something, or maybe just trying to fly away from all the sadness. It's a beautiful thing carved by someone with a steady hand. Someone who must have known the kind of grief that sits heavy on your chest. Anyway, one evening, as I was standing there, thinking of Marlene, I felt like the air was heavier. I figured maybe it was just the humidity this heat will get you, but then I saw the statue's eyes. There was something strange about them, like they were looking at me. Now, I'm no fool. I've been around long enough to know when to trust my instincts, and those instincts told me that Angel was no ordinary piece of stone. It wasn't the way the moonlight hit it, or the way the wind blew, but something about it felt alive. I told myself it was nothing. Just my grief messing with my mind, that's all. But deep down, there was a gnawing feeling. I stepped closer. My boots crunched the gravel, and I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I had a thought that maybe Marlene could hear me, could feel me standing there. So I whispered her name, hoping maybe foolishly that she could hear me. And then, as clear as day, a voice, not her voice, but a voice deep and distant, whispered my name right back. Earl. It was like the wind carried it, but it was too precise. Too clear, and in that moment, I knew something had changed. Something wasn't right. I turned to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. I was stuck there, staring at that statue, like it was pulling me in. That's when I heard it again, only this time, it wasn't a whisper. It was a low murmur, almost like a hum, coming from behind the statue. It felt like it was coming from inside the earth itself. I don't know how to explain it, but I could feel it in my bones, like it was reaching up for me. I told myself it was the wind again, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I stepped back, and my heart started racing. I wasn't sure what to do, but I could hear Marlene's voice in my head now, urging me to leave. I turned, and for a split second, I thought I saw something just a flicker, shape off to the side, moving between the headstones. I hurried out of there, my breath coming fast. As I drove away, I kept looking back through the rearview mirror, like something might be following me. I don't know what it was that night. I've told myself 100 times it was just my mind getting the best of me. But the truth is, I don't go near that cemetery anymore. I can still feel that same weight in the air whenever I think about it. And sometimes, when I pass by, I swear I see that angel statue, just standing there, watching Mitt's eyes following me in the dark. I don't know what's watching or what it wants, but I know one thing. Whatever it is, it's waiting. My name is Luther Brown, and I'm from a little place called Van Horn, Texas. It's been years since I've thought about it, but something keeps tugging at me whenever the nights get long. See, this wasn't the sort of thing you talk about in the daylight. Not with people who don't understand how the night can stretch on. Just outside the circle of your porch light, as if it's waiting for you to say something. So I'll tell you now, just to get it off my chest. This story's been sitting with me like an old wound, and maybe it'll help to finally share it. The summer it happened, I'd gone out to visit my cousin in a little town not too far off. His name was Jimmy, and he had a place on the outskirts, near where the highway starts to lose itself in nothing but mesquite and dirt. That night, we took a drive down an old dirt road, one that led nowhere particular, just a loop back to the highway. A little two-lane road no one ever thought about except for the coyotes. Jimmy had this old Ford truck, the kind you had to practically punch the starter to get going. And the engine made this sound that felt like it was grumbling at you. We were just talking, nothing much, when he pointed to a place off to the side, an old cemetery, way out in the brush. "You ever been to that one?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, just heard stories about it," I said. But then, there was something in the way the wind was blowing that made me feel a little uneasy. It's hard to explain, but the air just felt different, like it was holding its breath. We stopped the truck near the gate, a rusted old thing that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The sign, half faded, said Van Horn Memorial, but it looked like it belonged more in a forgotten corner of the world than in a place folks cared about. Jimmy grinned, like he knew something I didn't, and said, "Come on, let's take a look. Ain't nobody around to stop us." He had that look in his eye, like when we were kids daring each other to jump into the creek. So, we got out and started walking toward the entrance. The place was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that felt like it was pressing in on you, like the earth itself was holding its breath. You ever notice that kind of stillness in the air? The way the wind stops, just for a moment, like it's waiting for something. It was like that. The cemetery, with its leaning tombstones and cracked mausoleums, looked like it hadn't seen the sun in decades. You could tell it hadn't been cared for in years. The weeds were tall, and there was a moss growing on everything, making it look like something out of an old photograph, frozen in time. We didn't even notice at first, but as we wandered deeper in, something caught my eye in the distance. A shadow. At first, I figured it was just the way the moonlight was casting, but then it moved. Not like wind or a leaf blowing, but like it was walking. I stopped in my tracks and turned to Jimmy. "Did you see that?" I asked, but Jimmy just nodded, his face suddenly serious. "Yeah, I saw it," he said, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. It was like he was expecting it, or maybe had seen it before. He didn't explain, but I didn't need to ask any more questions. We started moving toward the shadow, the one standing near an old crypt that looked like it had been forgotten by everyone, even the wind. The figure was tall, taller than a man should be, and the closer we got, the more I felt that strange, heavy air press in on me. There was something about it that didn't sit right, something ancient, like it had been waiting for us for a long time. The figure didn't speak, just stood there, watching. You ever get that feeling someone's there, even when you can't see them? That's how it felt. It wasn't like a person, not exactly. More like something that had been tied to the place for as long as it had been there, watching, waiting. And then, when we were standing just a few feet away, the figure finally moved. Slowly, like it was part of the earth, part of the air itself. Jimmy stepped back, and I followed, both of us instinctively retreating without a word. But then, the figure spoke. It wasn't a voice, not like how I'm speaking to you, but more like a thought in my head, soft and cold. "Leave," it said, just that one word. I couldn't move at first. I don't know why, but it felt like it was coming from somewhere deep, from the bones of the place, from the ground itself. The figure didn't leave, just stood there, watching. Always watching. Jimmy grabbed my arm and pulled me back toward the truck. His eyes were wide, scared, and I could see that look of recognition in them. Like he'd seen this before, like he knew the rules of whatever that thing was. We didn't talk much on the way back. The truck's engine had that tired sound again, but it was quieter now, like it was just as eager to get out of there as we were. The air felt lighter once we were back on the road, but the silence in the truck wasn't gone. It stayed with me, a weight in my chest I couldn't shake. Later, I asked Jimmy what he thought that thing was. He just shrugged, said it was the Eternal Watcher. I didn't ask what he meant by that. I didn't want to know. I've never gone back, and I never will. You know, sometimes when I'm out driving at night, I'll pass by that cemetery on the edge of town. It's all overgrown now, like it's been forgotten, but I swear, sometimes, I can see that same figure standing in the distance, watching, waiting. It's like it never left. That night never really left me either. It stays with me, just like that wind that never seems to stop. It's always there, even when you can't see it. And sometimes, when the night is quiet enough, I think I hear that voice again, telling me to leave. My name is Jack McAllister, and I'm from a little place called Post, Texas. Now, it's been many years since I left that town, and I don't go back much anymore. Sometimes I think about it, though, about the dry, cracked roads, the old red barn near the county line, and the sound of the wind brushing through the mesquite trees. It's quiet there, real quiet, and I used to like it that way. But there was one night that I can't ever shake from my memory. It's not a story I tell often, but something about tonight makes me feel like I need to. You see, I was just a kid back then, not more than 17, and I remember it so clearly. The night when everything changed. It started with the storm. My old truck had been acting up for a week, and I knew it wasn't going to make it through another long drive to the gas station, but I didn't have much of a choice. That truck, a beat-up '79 Chevy, had seen better days, and the engine groaned and sputtered like it was ready to give up on me. I'd been out on the back roads of Post, going nowhere in particular, when the thunder started to roll in. The sky was heavy, full of the kind of dark, thick clouds that told you something big was coming. It wasn't the kind of storm you could run from. I had to stop for gas at this old station just outside of town, the kind that's only open till dusk, with a rusted-out sign and a long, creaky porch, the sort of place most folks don't stop at unless they have to. I wasn't in any rush, so I filled up and sat there for a while, sipping coffee from a thermos I'd brought along. The air smelled like rain on dirt, and the cicadas were starting to hum that constant, drawn-out song. As I was sitting there, trying to get the truck started again, I noticed something odd in the distance, near the edge of the cemetery. Now, the cemetery in Post, well, it's old. Real old. There's a spot in the back that even the townfolk talk about like it's something to avoid. The older folks say it's where the first settlers are buried. And every so often, someone sees something strange out there, some shadow or a flicker of light. That's just talk, of course. I always figured it was just the wind, or someone out there walking the old paths. But this night, with the storm coming in, there was something different about it. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I remember the porch light buzzing over the station, and the sound of it made the night feel heavier somehow. When I finally got the truck started, I drove past the cemetery. It wasn't far from the road, and as I passed, I saw it again. A light flickering in the back of the cemetery near that old spot. I couldn't explain why, but I felt a chill. It wasn't the kind of chill that comes with a storm. It was something else. Something waiting. Now at the time, I was young and dumb, thinking I could take on anything. So I made a decision that night. I pulled off the road and parked by the old cemetery gate. There was something calling me, or at least that's how it felt. Maybe I wanted to prove something to myself. Or maybe I was just looking for trouble. I wasn't sure. The gate creaked open, and I took the first few steps onto the path that wound through the gravestones. It was quiet, too quiet. I could hear the distant rumble of thunder, but the usual sounds of the night. The wind in the trees, the chirping of insects, they had all stopped. It was like the world had gone still, like it was waiting for something to happen. I kept walking, and the further I went, the more it felt like something was following me. Not in the way you'd think, like someone walking behind you, but like the ground itself was shifting beneath my feet. I remember stopping for a moment just to listen. That's when I heard it. A whisper, soft, just on the edge of hearing, like someone was calling my name. It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't the storm. I know that much for sure. It was human, and it was coming from deep within the cemetery. Without thinking, I took a step closer to the sound. I wasn't thinking straight. I was caught up in something, and I had to know what it was. As I walked further, I came to a little stone, barely visible in the overgrown grass. It was old, weathered, but the name was still legible. Mackenzie, that's all it said. Justin Mackenzie. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up when I saw that name, and I felt the ground shift again, like the earth was settling, like something had just been disturbed. It wasn't right. It wasn't just an old grave. I don't know why, but I reached out and touched it. That was my mistake. No sooner had my hand brushed the stone than the air around me turned cold, like someone had opened a freezer door right in front of me. The wind kicked up, swirling around in a way that didn't make sense. It wasn't natural. The air felt thick, like it was pressing down on me, and the whispering grew louder. It's like voices overlapping each other, all calling my name. I remember turning to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. It felt like the ground was holding me there, like it didn't want me to go. And then, just as quickly as it started, the coldness stopped. The wind died down, the whispers faded away, and the night returned to that heavy silence. But I knew. I knew something had woken up, something I wasn't supposed to disturb. I couldn't tell anyone about that night, not for years. I didn't even know what to say. What I do know is that after that, every time I drove past that cemetery, I'd see it. A light, just like that night, flickering in the distance. And it wasn't a trick of the storm or a street lamp. It was real. It's been years since I left post, and I haven't been back. I can't bring myself to go. Sometimes when I'm lying in bed at night, I think I hear it, that whisper, soft and distant, like it's still calling my name. I don't know if I'll ever really understand what happened that night. Maybe I'll never be able to explain it. But one thing I know for sure, some places, some things, they're not meant to be disturbed. And some spirits, they don't rest easy. My name is Tommy Rayburn, and I'm from Red River, Texas. Now, Red River ain't much of a place. Just a handful of houses, an old gas station, feed store that don't sell much feed anymore, and a lot of fields where the crops don't grow like they used to. But when I was younger, there was a part of me that felt like it was all the world I needed. Even now, when I think about those days, the dust still kicks up around the old house, and I can hear the screen door creaking on the porch. The sound like it's calling me back. It wasn't much, but it was home. And I spent most of my life there long enough to know when something ain't right. This one summer, I must have been about 30 or so. I was working on a little project. I'd been fixing up an old truck I'd bought from a man who'd left town. Needed the work to keep myself busy, you know? It's the kind of thing you do when you don't got much else but time. I was sitting on the porch one evening, the air thick with the promise of rain, when I noticed something strange. There was a man. Walking down the road, an older fella, hunched over a bit, and wearing a hat that was too big for him. He was moving slow, as if he was too tired to be walking at all. But there he was. I wasn't sure what drew me to him at first, but something about the way he moved made me feel uneasy. Not scared, mind you, but like there was something I didn't know yet. I saw him a few more times, just walking past my place, always around the same time, and I'd start to nod my head to him. He never said a word, just tipped his hat a little as he passed. After a while, I figured I'd ask him if he needed anything, maybe a ride or just someone to talk to. But when I walked outside to meet him one evening, he was gone. Just like that, without a trace. No footsteps in the dust. No sign of him turning off down a side road or heading toward the woods. I stood there for a while, listening to the wind, and the quiet hum of the porch light, wondering if I had imagined it. A week later, the rain finally came. It was the kind of rain that smelled of earth, fresh and deep, the kind that makes the world feel new again. I had just finished checking the truck when I saw the man again, standing in the yard. This time, I couldn't just let him pass by. I called out to him, asked if he was all right. He looked at me for a moment, his face hard to read. Then he nodded and told me he was looking for something. A place, he said, that I wouldn't know. I could see his hands were trembling, but it wasn't from the cold. His voice was cracked, like he hadn't used it much in years. He told me he was looking for something buried, but didn't say much else. I couldn't make sense of it, but I didn't push him. Instead, I invited him to stay the night. Said I had an extra bed. He refused, though, and said he'd find it on his own. The next day, I thought I'd never see him again. But that evening, I noticed something strange. A rock out by the creek had been moved. It was big, but it wasn't too heavy for me to move on my own, and I would have sworn I'd left it there just the day before. The ground around it had been disturbed too, like someone had been digging. I thought it was just the wind or maybe an animal, but the hair on the back of my neck stood up when I looked around. It didn't sit right with me. That night, I stayed up late, thinking about the man. Something about the whole thing gnawed at me. I went out by the creek, just to see if I could figure out what had happened. And when I went to move the rock, I found something, a small, weathered box, buried deep under the earth. It wasn't much, just a box made of wood, covered in dirt and leaves. But when I opened it, I found what looked like old papers, torn and stained. Among them was a map, faint and worn, but clear enough to tell it led somewhere not far from my place. I thought about the man then. Maybe he'd been looking for this, or maybe he'd just stumbled onto something he shouldn't have. The map wasn't much, just a few landmarks, some of them places I knew, others I didn't recognize. But one thing caught my eye. The last mark on the map was at the cemetery on the edge of town, the Panteon de los Muertos. It was an old, forgotten cemetery, the kind people only ever visit on Dia de los Muertos when they leave flowers for their loved ones. But something in my gut told me I needed to go there. I waited until the next night to head over. The air was cool, the stars barely showing through the clouds, and I didn't know what I expected to find. But as I walked through the gates, something felt off, like the cemetery was holding its breath. I walked past row after row of weathered stones, their engravings fading and half scraped away. Most of them were too old to read, but every now and then I'd catch a name that sounded familiar. The wind whispered through the trees, and I could hear the faint buzz of an old radio from some house in the distance. Then I saw the tombstone that matched the map. It was worn, nearly illegible, but there it was, standing like it had been waiting for me. I could hardly make out the name, but the shape of the stone itself seemed to call to me. I ran my hand over it, the stone cold and smooth under my fingers. It didn't feel like it was just a marker for the dead. It felt like it had something to say, something I wasn't ready to hear. And then, just as I stood there staring at it, I felt it like someone was watching me. I turned around, but no one was there. Just the wind and the trees, but I knew then that I wasn't alone. I stayed for a while, staring at that old tombstone, the map feeling heavy in my hand. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know what I was looking for. But something about that place made me feel like I was standing on the edge of something I shouldn't know. I never found the treasure the map promised. But when I left the cemetery that night, I noticed something strange. The name on the stone. The one that I couldn't read earlier was clear now. It was the name of the man who had walked by my house all those nights, the one who told me he was looking for something. I never saw him again after that. And I can't help but wonder if maybe he was the one who was supposed to find it. Maybe it was always meant to be his treasure to guard. But I still don't understand what happened or why I was the one to find it. Every time I drive by that old cemetery now, can't shake the feeling that something is still waiting there, just beyond the light of the porch. Something that won't ever let go, no matter how many years pass. Sometimes late at night, I still hear the faint sound of a man's voice calling from the dark. But when I listen close, I know it's not the wind. It's something else, something old, something patient.